a man once hailed as the Empire's finest warrior, had dedicated every fiber of his being to its glory. Yet upon returning home, his reward was not honor, but betrayal. However, fate had other plans. Through the mysterious power of an ancient relic, he was granted a second chance, reborn as an infant into one of the Empire's most illustrious noble families. Armed with the wisdom of a past life and a burning desire for vengeance, he resolved to carve a new destiny. This time he would rise not as a loyal soldier, but as a formidable necromancer. The story begins in Korea in the year 2045. Humanity was on the brink of extinction, under siege by monstrous beings of unimaginable strength and size. Amid the chaos, a desperate soldier fought valiantly, but his strength began to fail. As the beast prepared to strike the fatal blow, another warrior intervened, bullets tearing through the air as the monster howled in pain. That savior was Han Song, a soldier whose name inspired courage on every battlefield. Rallying his comrades, Han Song barked orders and reloaded his weapon, charging forward without hesitation. As Han Sung advanced toward a towering creature, its tentacles lashed out wildly. He dodged swiftly, each movement a testament to years of experience. He thought that perhaps only a handful of monsters still stood between humanity and peace. Taking aim, he steadied his rifle, but before he could fire, the ground trembled. A massive glowing sigil appeared beneath his feet, pulsing with otherworldly energy. Confusion flashed across his face as the portal came alive, pulling him in with irresistible force. His comrades shouted his name, but in a blink, Han Song was gone. When consciousness returned, he found himself shackled, wrists and ankles bound by glowing chains. A crowd surrounded him, their whispers filled with awe and disbelief. They had succeeded, they murmured. They had summoned a hero from another world. An elderly mage stepped forward, eyes gleaming. He welcomed Han Sung to the Empire and declared him the prophesied savior destined to slay the Demon King. The words only deepened Han Sung's confusion. This was not Korea, not his world, and certainly not his war. Before he could protest, the old man's aura flared. He invoked a spell, the Binding of the Covenant, forcing Han Sung into silence as searing pain coursed through his veins. The mage spoke coldly. If Han Sung obeyed, the spell would not harm him. The implication was clear. Disobedience meant agony. Grimly, Han Sung accepted. There was no escape. Thus began his unwilling service to a foreign empire. Years passed. He fought countless battles, conquered lands, and led endless campaigns under the Empire's banner. The dream of returning home grew dimmer with every victory. Even after slaying the Demon King, peace eluded him. The Empire demanded more. One day, the same old man appeared again, serene as ever, sipping tea as if the world were not drenched in blood. He handed Han Sung a new target, Nation Bottle, the Knight of Teutonia, and declared that only after killing him would Han Sung earn his freedom. When Han Sung hesitated, the cursed device around his neck flared, tightening like a noose. His rage boiled. Was there no end to their manipulation, no peace after all his sacrifice? The scene shifts to the war-ravaged kingdom of Teutonia, where Han Sung stands amidst the smoldering ruins, locked in a brutal duel with his final target, the knight known as Bottle. Steel clashes, sparks erupt, and with one decisive strike, Han Sung's blade finds its mark. The mortally wounded knight collapses, coughing blood, yet manages a bitter smile. "Fool," Bottle rasps, his voice trembling, "to keep obeying that damned empire." Guilt flickers across Han Sung's face. "I had no choice," he mutters, his words heavy with remorse. With blood staining his lips, Bottle lets out a hollow laugh. "Don't apologize," he whispers. "Soon enough you'll realize they'll throw you away too." The knight's eyes fade, his warning lingering in the air. Han Sung exhales shakily, believing his mission is complete, that perhaps at long last he can return home. But fate mocks him once more. From behind, a cold voice cuts through the silence. "Splendid work, Han Sung." Before he can turn, pain explodes through his body. A blade pierces his chest. He looks down, gasping, to see Count Brandenburg standing there smiling cruelly. "Congratulations," the Count says, twisting the sword deeper. "You've served the Empire well, like a loyal hunting dog." Blood spills from Han Sung's mouth as realization dawns. The promise of returning home had been a lie. His eyes widen with fury and disbelief. "Why?" he croaks. Brandenburg scoffs. "Why would we ever let a hound roam free? Dogs are born to bite when ordered." He twists the blade one final time before pulling it free. "Farewell, hero." Han Sung falls to his knees, the world fading into red. As darkness closes in, hatred burns hotter than the pain. His trembling lips form a final vow to never forgive the Empire and to see it crumble into ashes. A brilliant blue light bursts from his chest, consuming his body. That night, one life ended and another began. When he opens his eyes again, he is no longer a dying warrior but a newborn, cradled in the arms of a beautiful woman. Her gentle smile radiates warmth as she whispers, "My child, I am your mother." Behind her stands a tall man with long dark hair and sharp eyes. Something about him feels familiar. Then it strikes him. Duke Saxon, the most powerful necromancer on the continent. Han Sung realizes the truth. He has been reborn in Acropolis, the Empire's forbidden capital of death magic. A faint glow appears before his vision, a message confirming what he already suspects. The stone of reincarnation has been successfully activated. It had worked. His desperate gamble had paid off. The artifact he risked everything to use had given him a new life, though the vessel he'd be born into had been left to chance. Fate, it seemed, had been generous. He was now the firstborn heir of House Saxon, one of the Empire's most prestigious families. A faint smirk forms in the infant's mind. Born with a golden spoon, he thinks. Perfect. The Empire that betrayed me will burn from within. But to the adults, something seems odd. The baby does not cry. The Duchess holding him looks to the nanny with concern. Why isn't he crying? The nanny checks the child's breathing, then replies, "He's perfectly healthy, Your Grace. Perhaps he's just calm." Duke Saxon folds his arms, frowning. A tearless child is an ill omen. The nanny laughs nervously. "Nonsense, my lord. If you wish to hear him cry, simply give him a little slap." She pats the baby's rear lightly, but Han Sung, now Dale Saxon, refuses to cry, glaring silently. The Duke raises an eyebrow while the Duchess hides a chuckle. "He must have inherited your stubbornness," she teases. Taking the baby into her own arms, the Duchess says softly, "Let me try." But instead of another slap, she gently pats his back, her hands warm and tender. For a moment the child's thoughts halt. The warmth seeps through him, awakening something long buried. Memories flood his mind, years of pain, war, and loneliness. He cannot remember the last time someone touched him with such care. The emotion overwhelms him. The great warrior who never shed a tear in battle finally breaks. His tiny body trembles as a loud, desperate cry fills the room. The Duchess laughs in relief, tears glistening in her eyes. "There we go," she whispers. "Welcome home, little one." 8 years pass. Han Sung, now known as Dale Saxon, grows into a bright and curious child. His parents often remark how quickly time has flown. The Duchess fondly observes how her son has been inseparable from his books since the age of 4. Duke Saxon smiles at her words. "He takes after you," she says warmly. "Or perhaps after me," the Duke chuckles. "His interest in magic is undeniable." Her smile fades slightly. "You promised, Alan. No necromancy," he nods reassuringly. "Of course, I remember. I have something else planned for his birthday." But before she can ask, frantic knocking echoes through the halls. A maid bursts in, pale and shaking. "My lord, my lady, something's happened to young Master Dale." The couple rushes down the corridor, their hearts pounding. They find their son collapsed on the floor of the library, surrounded by a surge of glowing blue mana. The Duchess falls to her knees, crying his name. "Dale, are you hurt?" He blinks, dazed. "I'm fine, mother." The Duke stands frozen, astonishment in his eyes. He's already releasing mana. Ignoring his wife's pleas, he steps closer. "Dale," he says, voice low but firm. "Did that power just come from you?" Panic flashes in the boy's eyes. He hadn't meant to reveal his strength so soon. But before he can form an excuse, his father's stern expression softens into pride. "As expected of my son," the Duke says, ruffling his hair. "A pity I cannot teach you necromancy myself." Dale's heart sinks. The world's greatest necromancer, his own father, refuses to train him. How then could he ever fulfill his vow of vengeance? His mother gently strokes his head. "Go and rest, dear." As he walks away, he overhears his father murmur to her, "Elena, I've just thought of the perfect gift for his birthday." Shortly after, the grand celebration of Dale's 8th birthday unfolds in full splendor. The grand hall of the Noir Duchy buzzes with laughter and music as nobles gather to honor the young heir. Yet, amid the lively atmosphere, Dale sits alone on the balcony of the 2nd floor, his small frame leaning against the railing as he gazes down at the glittering crowd below. The cheer and chatter feel distant, hollow even. Having spent a life being used and discarded, the sudden warmth of attention unsettles him more than it comforts. His thoughts drift to the incident 2 days earlier when his mana suddenly spiraled out of control. Now he understands. It had happened after he read the life of the hero from another world. The memories of his former life had stirred something deep within, igniting his dormant power. Even now he feels the lingering pulse of that energy and wonders how to persuade his father to teach him necromancy, the art he desperately needs for revenge. But he dismisses the idea almost instantly. He knows how unlikely it is. Just then, his mother, Duchess Eleanor, appears beside him, radiant as ever, accompanied by a hooded figure. "Happy birthday, my dear," she says with a gentle smile. Dale blinks and looks past her at the stranger. The hood falls back to reveal a woman with flowing blue hair and serene elven features. Her presence radiates calm strength. "This is Sophia," Elena announces proudly, "an elder of the Blue Magic Tower, as well as a master of water attribute magic and your new instructor." For a moment, Dale is too stunned to respond. His birthday gift, a master of the Blue Tower, a water magic specialist, gentle, defensive, and the exact opposite of what he seeks. His heart sinks. His mother clearly intends to steer him away from the darkness of necromancy. Later, Sophia requests to speak with Dale privately. Together they walk through the snow-dusted garden. Her voice is calm yet piercing as she states, "Your mother instructed me to teach only water magic, but tell me, Dale, is that truly what you wish to learn?" Dale freezes, his eyes narrowing. How does she know? Sophia's lips curve into a knowing smile. "It's only natural you'd want to master your father's art, necromancy." Her tone softens, but her words carry weight. "Unfortunately, that path is sealed to you for now." She explains the vow made years ago, how Duke Alan Saxon had promised his beloved Lady Elena that he would never pass down the dark arts to their children. The elders of the Noir Magic Tower themselves had witnessed the oath, their white robes symbolizing purity and renunciation. "So you see," she concludes, "your father's hands are bound, but that does not mean the road is closed forever." Dale listens intently as she continues, her eyes gleaming with quiet confidence. "If you trust me, I might find a way to persuade your mother one day." Suspicion flickers in his gaze. "But you're an elf," he says sharply. "Aren't necromantic arts repulsive to your kind?" Sophia chuckles softly. "Tell me, young one, when priests use divine power to restore life to the dying, is that not also meddling with death?" A shimmering illusion forms before his eyes, a radiant scene of holy resurrection. Light or dark, both define nature in their own way. They are not opposites, merely reflections of the same truth. Her words shake something within him. For the first time, Dale feels genuine respect for a teacher. Sophia smiles faintly. "Let's begin your first lesson then." She explains that he has already formed a fragment of his mana circle. His first goal is to expand it into completion, the foundation of all spellcraft. Dale nods eagerly, his heart racing. Under her guidance, he closes his eyes and places a hand over his chest. The world fades, replaced by a vast sea of shimmering blue energy. He can sense the mana swirling around his heart, waiting to be tamed. Following Sophia's instructions, he draws the scattered fragments together, compressing them into motion. Moments later, a radiant blue circle flares to life around him. Sophia, unaware of what's happening, continues to speak patiently about the slow, month-long process of forming a mana circle until Dale interrupts her. He raises his hand, and a stream of perfectly stable blue mana dances between his fingers. "I think I've done it," he says quietly. Sophia stares speechless. Her eyes widen in disbelief. It's impossible. No novice should be able to complete a circle in minutes, yet the proof glows before her. As Dale watches the mana swirl effortlessly in his palm, Sophia realizes this boy isn't ordinary. A prodigy, she thinks, her pulse quickening. Unaware of her awe, Dale focuses inward, feeling a strange sense of destiny awaken. In his previous life, his powers had been shackled to destruction alone, crude, limited, and insufficient for vengeance. But this time, reborn with his father's innate affinity, he can truly harness mana, and as he feels the power hum through his veins, one thought burns clearly in his heart. This time, he will master not just water magic, but many type. After completing his mana circle, he stood silent, his focus unwavering. He drew a deep breath, channeling energy from the glowing circle within his chest to the tips of his fingers. A faint shimmer appeared before his hand, and then, with a surge of intent, a translucent magic circle formed in midair. The mana condensed and hardened, transforming into a sleek shard of ice that glowed faintly blue in the pale light. This will be the first of many weapons to one day strike the Empire's throat, he swore inwardly. With steady precision, the ice bolt solidified completely, sharp as a blade and flawless in structure. Sophia, who had been observing closely, widened her eyes in disbelief. Normally, a beginner's mana would scatter chaotically upon release, but Dale's control was absolute. He had shaped the energy perfectly, stabilizing it into a true spell, something that even trained apprentices often failed to accomplish. It might not be strong, Dale remarked calmly, his tone almost casual. I focused more on its form than its power. Before Sophia could respond, he extended his hand and released the spell. The ice bolt streaked across the clearing like lightning and struck a thick oak tree. A deafening crack echoed as frost spread from the point of impact, the trunk shattering into splinters. Sophia stared in stunned silence. The bolt hadn't simply hit its mark. It had pierced clean through, the edges of the wound polished like glass. No 8-year-old, not even the most talented noble-born mage, should possess this level of control or destructive force. As Dale turned to her with a bright, innocent smile, Sophia's thoughts swirled in disbelief. What kind of child is this? She knelt in the snow to inspect the damage. Traces of residual mana still lingered in the air, pure and stable. The spell wasn't just strong, it had been crafted with elegance and mathematical precision. Dale hadn't merely unleashed power, he had instinctively drawn cold energy from the air itself, seamlessly fusing it with his own mana. It was a basic spell by classification, yet executed with perfection that bordered on genius. When Dale timidly asked if he had done something wrong, Sophia forced a gentle smile, hiding the turmoil in her thoughts. The formation he'd unconsciously constructed contained an advanced tri-sequence rotation, acceleration, and condensation, the very essence of the golden ratio formula used in high-tier military magic. Such structural sophistication couldn't have been accidental. Inwardly, she finally understood why Duke Alan Saxon had regretted being unable to teach his son. Later that evening, Sophia stood before the Duke in his study. Alan Saxon, dressed in a dark formal coat, listened intently as she recounted the day's events. When she finished, he leaned forward, astonished. "You mean to tell me you cannot teach him?" he asked incredulously. "If my son reached the first circle within minutes, shouldn't you guide him even more?" Sophia met his gaze calmly. "Your Grace, as soon as he formed his first circle, he instinctively cast a lethal spell, and not a crude one. It was a perfected formula, the golden ratio used in combat-grade magic. To see an 8-year-old achieve that, it's beyond belief." The Duke's brow furrowed, struggling to process her words. Sophia exhaled softly, then added, "Your son, Duke Saxon, possesses an extraordinary gift, an instinctual affinity for death and destruction. In simpler terms, he was born with a talent for killing." Alan's eyes darkened at the statement, misunderstanding her tone. "Are you refusing him because of that? Because the Blue Magic Tower forbids violence?" Sophia shook her head quickly. "Not at all. If anything, that's exactly why he must be guided. Before that gift consumes him, I don't wish to suppress his nature, only to steer it." The Duke's expression softened slightly, though worry still clouded his features. "I see," he murmured. Sophia hesitated, then pressed further. "However, I believe your son's heart already leans toward another path, that of the Noir Magic Tower, the same path you once vowed never to pass on." At her words, Alan's eyes shadowed with guilt. He knew she was right. "I respect the promise you made to Lady Alina," Sophia said quietly, "but that vow should not dictate the future of a child with such monumental potential. The boy deserves the freedom to choose his destiny." While the two adults spoke in hushed tones, Dale sat just outside the study, his ear pressed against the cold wooden door. He could barely make out fragments of their conversation, but understood enough to know they were talking about him. With a quiet sigh, he slid down to the floor, knees tucked close. "I didn't think that spell would be so strong," he admitted inwardly. The image of Sophia's astonished face replayed in his mind, making him frown. "I'll need to control my mana better next time." "Dale!" The sudden voice made him jump. Looking up, he saw a tall man in polished silver armor standing in the corridor, his expression warm and familiar. "Uncle Helmut!" Dale exclaimed with pure delight, rushing toward him. Helmut laughed heartily, lifting the boy into a bear hug. "You've grown again, little one. What are you doing sitting on the floor?" "I was just thinking," Dale replied with a shy smile. Then, with playful curiosity, he asked, "Were you fighting monsters again?" Helmut grinned. Of course, someone has to keep the duchy safe from those beasts. Dale's smile faltered for a moment. He knew how dangerous those battles were. The knights of every domain fought endlessly to suppress dungeon outbreaks, but in the Duchy of Saxon, the situation was worse than anywhere else. The reason lay in history, a past life's echo. After the hero's victory over the Demon King, Duke Alan Saxon had been ordered by the Empire to conquer the former Demon King's lands. The endless tide of monsters that still roamed there was, in truth, the Empire's burden cast upon them. Dale couldn't help but smirk bitterly at the thought, a classic case of dumping the leftovers. Back in the present, Dale gazed at his uncle with genuine worry and told him to stay safe. Helmut, touched by the boy's concern, chuckled softly and asked if the young lord was fretting over him. Dale simply replied that his uncle looked well, which made Helmut laugh again. Just then, Duke Alan Saxon stepped out of his study. Helmut immediately dropped to one knee in salute, and the Duke nodded approvingly, thanking the knight for his service. At that moment, Duchess Elenella appeared, her elegant composure breaking into a radiant smile as she called out to her son. She hurried toward Dale, kneeling before him with shining eyes, excitedly telling him she'd heard about his achievement, reaching the first circle, and that she couldn't be prouder. Dale leaned in affectionately, rubbing his cheek against hers, and his father, with a rare warm smile, congratulated him as well. Feeling generous, the Duke asked his son what reward he wished for. The question caught Dale off guard. He wanted to request permission to study necromancy, but knew that would raise suspicion. Scrambling for something a normal child might say, he blurted out with innocent enthusiasm that he wanted a little sister. The room fell into stunned silence. Both parents blushed deeply, exchanging flustered glances before the Duke awkwardly promised, "We'll do our best." Behind them, Helmut and another knight struggled to contain their laughter. That night, exhausted from the day's events, Dale collapsed into bed. He yawned, thinking about how exhausting it was to pretend to be a cheerful, ordinary child. His body ached from the strain of using magic for the first time, and sleep soon claimed him, but his rest turned into torment. A nightmare dragged him back into his previous life. The moment of betrayal. Before him loomed the spectral figure of Count Brandenburg, his voice dripping with mockery. "Grown soft already, have you?" the phantom sneered. "Has this cozy little life made you forget your promise?" His words echoed like venom. "The Empire will find you, boy. They'll scour every corner of this world until you're erased, body and soul." The nightmare's grip broke with a gasp. Dale jolted upright, drenched in cold sweat as violent mana burst from his chest. Pain tore through him, the energy within spiraling wildly out of control. A mana rampage, he muttered through gritted teeth, recognizing the deadly state. Blue light pulsed around him, tearing at his insides. Desperate, he stumbled outside, hoping the cold air might calm the chaos, but the rampage only worsened. His vision blurred, the mana roared like a storm within him. Just as he was about to collapse, a calm voice broke through the night. "You seem to be in quite the predicament," said Sophia. Startled, Dale looked up to see his teacher standing before him, moonlight reflecting in her calm eyes. Sophia approached slowly, observing him with a mix of admiration and unease. She remarked softly that his magic overflowed with talent, but also with something deeply dangerous. She reached out and placed her hand gently over his heart. Warm, steady mana flowed from her palm, soothing the raging currents within him. As she focused, her expression darkened slightly. She could sense the malice buried deep within his mana. If left unchecked, it would consume him. Gradually, the violent energy settled, condensing into a faintly glowing orb of blue light in Dale's palms. He stared at it, breathing heavily, relief washing over him. Sophia called his name, her tone grave. She told him that his gift was not one of creation or protection. It was the power to take life. "A dangerous talent," she said quietly. Then she held out a large, dark tome engraved with a pentagram. "This is why," she continued, "I'm grateful that I'm the one teaching you." Dale froze. The air around the book felt cold and heavy, its dark aura unmistakable, a necromancy grimoire. As he touched it, black mist swirled faintly from its pages. Sophia smiled softly, her eyes warm despite the ominous gift. "Perhaps it's fate that we met," she whispered, "and happy birthday, Dale." Overcome with emotion, Dale impulsively wrapped his arms around her waist. She blinked in surprise before letting out a quiet laugh, gently patting his back. "You really are a clingy one," she teased. A few days later, Sophia led Dale into the snowy plains for their next lesson. She told him today's targets were rabbits, Dale blinked in surprise, unsure if he'd heard correctly, but Sophia nodded, instructing him to focus, to think of hunting with his father and channel that instinct. He obeyed. Forming a precise magic circle, a white rabbit appeared in the distance. Dale narrowed his gaze, channeled his mana, and released a sharp ice projectile. It struck true, fast, clean, and lethal. Sophia observed in silence, even after taking a life. Dale's expression didn't change. His hands didn't tremble. There was no hesitation and no remorse. Sophia then called Dale forward, announcing the start of a new lesson. She began by explaining that even when casting the same spell, its appearance and nature often differ from one mage to another. Curious, she asked if he knew why. With a knowing smile, Sophia revealed the truth. Magic, she said, is a reflection of the caster's soul. It manifests what lies within their heart, given shape through mana. To demonstrate, she raised her hand and conjured a soft current of water that danced gracefully in the air. Magic, she continued, is the landscape of one's inner world. Dale listened intently, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple as he tried to absorb her words. Sophia went on, explaining that the names of spells like firewall or frozen armor were merely tools, stepping stones for focusing one's imagination. She mentioned how the teachings of the great magic towers followed this philosophy. The Red Tower's fire magic was fierce and destructive, while her own Blue Tower's water magic was fluid, adaptable, and ever-changing. Each tower's philosophy, she said, shaped the very form of the magic they wielded. She also spoke briefly of the White, Noir, and Green Towers, each embodying its own elemental ideals. Then, with a gentle smile, Sophia admitted that such abstract lessons might be a little advanced for her young pupil. Changing course, she decided it was time for Dale's first practical session in necromancy, the art of raising the dead. Following her guidance, Dale extended his hand. Dark mana gathered at his fingertips and streamed toward a small rabbit's lifeless body. With careful precision, he bounded mana to the creature's joints, head, spine, and knees, and slowly coaxed it to stand. Its eyes glowed a faint red, signaling success. Impressed, Sophia praised his control. "Excellent work. Let's move to the next stage," she said. His next task was to coat the undead creature in frozen armor. Focusing his mana once more, Dale summoned shards of glimmering ice that rapidly enveloped the rabbit, encasing it in jagged, crystalline protection. Sophia tested his creation by launching an ice bolt directly at it. The projectile struck hard, shattering part of the armor, but the rabbit remained unharmed. Dale's face lit up with pride. "I did it," he exclaimed. His master gave an approving nod. Encouraged, Dale hesitated only a moment before making a bold request. He asked her to teach him not just necromancy, but also how to refine his control over water magic. Her smile faded into a cold mask. "No," she said flatly. The word hit him like a spell. Before he could protest, Sophia elaborated. The water element, she explained, was vast and deep, requiring patience and spiritual understanding. Managing two distinct magic attributes was something only dual mages could achieve, and such individuals were exceedingly rare. For a child his age, it was nearly unthinkable. Dale feigned hurt. "But you said we'd walk this path together," he reminded her softly. The guilt in his voice made her flustered. Unable to respond, Sophia abruptly declared the lesson over and left. That night, however, Dale refused to be discouraged. In the vast study hall, surrounded by ancient tomes, he immersed himself in research. "There's nothing I can't do," he muttered. Dark purple energy coiled around him, lifting the books into the air as he began an intense, sleepless night of study and experimentation. By dawn, Sophia found him again, standing in the snowy plains with weary eyes but an eager smile. When she asked if he'd slept, he merely replied that he had prepared something to show her. At his gesture, the armored zombie rabbit appeared once more. Sophia watched astonished as the icy shell covering the creature began to tremble, crack, and then explode outward, sending a volley of frozen shards in all directions. Her eyes widened further as the undead rabbit gathered a sphere of dark mana between its paws and released it. The ensuing blast combined both the ice and the dark energy into a devastating wave that shook the ground. Forced to defend herself, Sophia raised a hexagonal barrier to withstand the explosion. When the dust finally settled, Dale stood proudly, explaining that he had merged ice explosion with corpse explosion, blending water and dark attributes into one seamless technique. As he summoned an orb of water in one hand and a swirl of darkness in the other, he looked up at her with quiet confidence. "Tell me, master," he asked softly, "does this make me a dual mage?" Sophia stood within the shimmering barrier she had conjured, her eyes wide with disbelief at the devastation Dale had wrought. Never before had she witnessed a technique quite like his. The spell was a grim masterpiece, a fusion of corpse explosion and frozen armor that turned shattered ice and bone into a deadly storm of blades. The surrounding snow was marked with scars of frost and dark energy, a chilling testament to the boy's destructive power. Kneeling in the snow, Sophia examined one of the razor-sharp shards glinting under the pale light. Her expression hardened. Dale's magic, she realized, wasn't born of creativity or artistry, but of lethal precision. It was the kind of spellwork one might expect from a battle-hardened killer, not an 8-year-old child. A faint unease stirred within her. What kind of darkness resided in his mind to conceive something so merciless? Before she could dwell on the thought, Dale's expression shifted from surprise to joy. He waved energetically toward the distance. "Uncle Helmut," he called out. A column of armored riders approached through the snow, their black steeds snorting frost. At the head rode Sir Helmut, his polished armor gleaming faintly beneath the gray sky. He greeted both Dale and Sophia with a warm, booming laugh, the black cavalry halting behind him. These knights were the pride of the Duchy of Saxon, known for their unmatched skill and for channeling aura through their lances. Sir Helmut himself was counted among the 7 strongest swordmasters on the continent. Brimming with excitement, Dale reminded his uncle of the promise he had made to teach him swordsmanship. Helmut chuckled heartily and assured him that he had not forgotten. As he and his men turned their horses to depart, he reminded Dale not to linger too long in the cold. Once the cavalry vanished beyond the snowy hills, Sophia approached her student, her tone calm but firm. "That's enough for today, Dale. Let's return," she said. He nodded respectfully, answering, "Yes, master." That evening, Sophia stood before Duke Alan Saxon and Duchess Elena in the grand study of the ducal estate. Her report was straightforward yet shocking. Young Dale had achieved mastery over both necromancy and water magic, successfully forming his first circle in each. The Duke and Duchess exchanged astonished looks. Alan's voice was sharp with concern. "We asked you to instruct him only in water magic," he said. Sophia bowed slightly. "I understand, my lord, but as his mentor I felt it necessary to nurture his talent wherever it led. His ambition exceeds the boundaries of one attribute," she explained. Duchess Elena hesitated, then sighed softly, her expression thoughtful. "If that is his wish, then continue to teach him," she said at last. "Guide him carefully." Sophia promised she would, offering an apologetic bow before leaving the chamber. After she departed, Elena turned to her husband, awe still lingering in her eyes. "To think he has become a dual mage at 8 years old, it feels unreal," she murmured. Alan smiled faintly, though there was a shadow of unease behind it. "He frightens even me," he admitted, "but such power suits our bloodline." He fell silent for a moment, then looked toward the flickering hearth. "Elena, I have decided. I will teach Dale necromancy myself," he said. Her eyes widened. "You would break your vow?" Alan nodded solemnly. "I must. As his father, I want to give him strength. Strength to lead, to protect, to carry our name with pride. And as a mage, I want a disciple worthy of my legacy," he said. Emotion welled in his voice as he reached for her hands. "Forgive me, Elena. I cannot keep that promise any longer," he admitted. The Duchess was quiet for a long while. Then she stepped forward and embraced him gently. "If you are going to do this, then make him so strong that no one dares speak ill of him or his art," she whispered. Moved, the Duke held her tightly. "I swear it, our son will surpass them all," he vowed. The next morning, deep beneath the ducal castle, Dale stood before his father in the family's ancient magic workshop. The air was cold and heavy with mana. A single dead rabbit lay atop a stone altar. Duke Alan's voice carried a tone of strict authority. "You raise the dead without understanding what you command. That is unacceptable," he said. Dale looked down, flustered. "I only followed what Master Sophia taught me," he explained. "Then forget those crude methods," the Duke said sharply. "Under my guidance, you will learn the true essence of necromancy," he continued. Instead of beginning with spells, Alan directed his son to a massive desk stacked high with grim tomes and anatomy charts. "Memorize them all, every bone, every muscle, every tendon. Only when you understand life can you control death," he instructed. And so began Dale's true training, not through casting, but through endless study. Days passed in silence, broken only by the sound of turning pages and whispered incantations. By the end of it, Dale had committed every word of those texts to memory, taking his first step toward mastering his father's forbidden art. Acknowledging his son's remarkable progress, Duke Alan Saxon presented Dale with a massive tome, his voice steady. "The fundamentals are complete. And now it is time for practical application. Dale's eyes widened as he glimpsed the subject of his first real exercise, the lifeless body of a goblin. Confusion flickered across his face. Noticing his hesitation, the Duke allowed a faint, knowing smile to tug at his lips. He explained the stark difference between a fledgling warlock and a master necromancer. A novice could barely coax a swordmaster's corpse into shambling, whereas a skilled necromancer could elevate even a lowly soldier into a formidable death knight. He gestured toward the goblin, presenting it as a simple test, and challenged Dale, "How will you choose to breathe life into this body?" Dale inhaled deeply, centering himself as violet mana swirled around him. Internally, he acknowledged the complexity of the task. Animating a bipedal goblin was far more intricate than a mere rabbit. With a surge of concentration, he sent threads of dark energy into the corpse. As he manipulated the body, he felt as though he were controlling a highly intricate marionette. Attempting to reinforce the goblin's durability, he accelerated post-mortem rigidity, but the result was disastrous. The creature's joints locked in place, leaving it completely immobile. At that moment, his father, Duke Alan, placed a steady hand on his shoulder. His eyes glimmered with raw power as he spoke calmly. "Hardening the body is clever, but it comes at the cost of movement." Then, with a fluid motion, the Duke unleashed a torrent of dark, roiling mana that engulfed the goblin. Dale could only gape, paralyzed by awe. The goblin floated above the table, fully reanimated, crackling with potent purple energy. Alan's voice resonated through the chamber as he instructed, "The rib cage exists to shield vital organs, yet there is no life to protect here. A necromancer must learn to manipulate the body itself." With a sweep of his hand, the goblin's rib cage exploded outward, reshaping into a lattice of long, razor-sharp bone blades jutting menacingly from its chest. A sinister grin spread across the Duke's face as he imparted the essence of necromancy. A master must understand the structure of their subject and reshape it to serve their purpose. Dale's face turned pale, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. He stared in wide-eyed shock at the grotesquely transformed goblin, the lesson sinking deep into his mind. Duke Alan concluded, "This understanding and the ability to alter a body is the foundation of black magic." Determined, Dale looked at his father and asked to learn the philosophy underpinning the Manhwa Magic Tower, the mindset behind its power. A pleased expression crossed the Duke's face. He knelt to meet his son's gaze, his tone grave but encouraging. "You seek truth, and it always resides within death. To grasp it, you must first comprehend the weight of life." The words struck Dale with vivid clarity, evoking a memory from another existence. He saw himself as Han Sung, standing amidst a battlefield littered with fire and corpses. A man pleaded for mercy, but he raised his bloodied sword without hesitation and struck, silencing the scream forever. The vision rattled him, leaving his heart pounding. "Dale," his father's voice cut through the haze, concern evident. "Are you all right?" The boy's face paled, sweat dampening his hair, and he struggled to answer. He stammered, insisting he was fine, each repetition more firm than the last. Alone in the dim workshop, Dale braced himself, the room tilting around him as he silently affirmed that he was indeed unharmed. As Dale continued his rigorous daily training under Duke Alan, word of the young prodigy spread like wildfire. The revelation that the Duke had begun instructing his son in the dark arts ignited scandal across the empire. Nobles and mages alike watched intently, from cunning red-haired schemers to austere gray-haired lords and shrewd witches. Every corner of the empire buzzed with whispers, all eyes on the boy who defied expectation and embraced the shadow of necromancy at such a tender age. A few weeks later, Dale's focus had shifted to swordsmanship, and he now faced his uncle Helmut across the sparring ground. The clash of wooden blades rang sharply as they engaged in a rapid, fluid duel. Helmut, a veteran of countless battles, deflected each of Dale's strikes with effortless precision, his lips curling into a confident smile. Unfazed, Dale's eyes narrowed, scanning for even the slightest opening. Helmut's smirk deepened, impressed by his nephew's determination, and he pressed forward with a flurry of strikes. Dale nimbly dodged a particularly forceful swing, then leapt into a breathtaking airborne counterattack, spinning to deliver a strike from an angle his uncle hadn't anticipated. Helmut froze for a heartbeat, his eyes widening in surprise as Dale's wooden sword knocked his own weapon from his grip. Catching his breath, Dale looked up to see Helmut chuckle heartily, commending him on a fine performance. However, Dale, ever perceptive, pointed out that a knight of Helmut's skill would never truly lose his weapon, deducing that his uncle had allowed it intentionally. Helmut waved off the suggestion, insisting his astonishment had been genuine, adding that the techniques Dale had just executed were designed for real combat and would have been fatal to an ordinary person. He shook his head ruefully, commenting that Dale's talent with the sword was so extraordinary it was almost unfortunate he was fated to be a mage. Placing a reassuring hand on Dale's shoulder, Helmut asked why his young nephew pushed himself so relentlessly. He knelt down, carefully tending to the bandages on Dale's hands, cautioning him against overexertion. Dale examined his own hands and, with a determined grin, explained that it would not do for the Duke's son to rely solely on guards and protective magic. He added with a touch of playful flattery that he could not pass up the rare chance to train under one of the 7 greatest swordsmen of the continent. Helmut erupted into laughter, declaring Dale's answer magnificent and saying that if he had a son like him, he would feel no regret. Dale grinned in triumph, savoring the praise. Their laughter and banter were interrupted by the arrival of Duchess Elena, who noted that both seemed in remarkably high spirits. Dale greeted his mother warmly and asked what had brought her to the training grounds. Elena smiled, explaining that she wanted to see how diligently her son was working and that she had news to share. Then, with a playful tone, she asked if he remembered the birthday request he had made. Dale paused, frowning as he tried to recall. A memory surfaced, the impulsive moment when he had asked for a little sister, leaving both his parents momentarily stunned and blushing. Dale's eyes widened in astonishment as Elena, her face radiant with joy and a gentle hand resting on her stomach, revealed the news. She explained that he would soon have a baby sister and that he must take good care of her. The shock melted into pure delight on Dale's face, and he eagerly promised to protect her with all his heart. 10 months later, in a beautifully adorned chamber, the Saxon family gathered around the newest member of the household. Dale was captivated, leaning over the crib to get a closer look at his infant sister. Elena teased him gently, asking if he found the baby so fascinating, and Dale nodded enthusiastically. He brushed his fingers against the baby's soft cheek, marveling at the reality that she was truly his sister. Overcome with affection, he could not help but think how utterly adorable she was. Observing his adoration, Duke Alan asked if Dale wished to hold the baby. Dale blushed furiously, hesitant at first, but Elena encouraged him, carefully placing the swaddled child into his arms. He found the experience far less daunting than he had imagined. The Duke remarked that the infant bore a striking resemblance to him, and Elena added that curiously the baby cried whenever she held her, but seemed content in Dale's arms. Dale looked down at his sister, a tender expression softening his features. His father then asked how he felt. Dale's eyes grew serious as he replied that, although she was as light as a feather, she carried an incredible weight. The Duke smiled knowingly, placing a hand on Dale's shoulder. "What you are feeling," he said, "is the weight of life. Never forget that sensation." Just as Dale absorbed his father's words, Elena's cheerful voice cut through the room, reminding him that it was time for his lesson and that Sophia was undoubtedly waiting for him. The scene shifted to a snow-laden forest where Sophia stood waiting for her student. She informed Dale that today's lesson would be focused on real combat practice. Dale, a hint of apprehension in his expression, hesitated, asking if he could truly fight her with full force. Sophia encouraged him, urging him to attack with everything he had. Rising to the challenge, Dale summoned a radiant blue magic circle beneath him. Sophia, encircled by crackling streams of water magic, remarked that she was eager to witness his growth. Without hesitation, Dale launched his assault, hurling 2 massive razor-sharp shards of ice toward her. Sophia effortlessly shattered the first projectile, deeming it too slow, and casually deflected the second. Holding a fragment of the broken spell in her hand, she fixed him with a sly, challenging smile and chided him, questioning how a student could dare to hold back against his master. Dale's breath caught as he realized he had been fully read, his gaze hardening with renewed determination. Sophia warned him to raise a barrier immediately before sending a surging torrent of water magic hurtling toward him. Dale's eyes widened in alarm as the blast approached, striking with immense force. He managed to erect a protective ice gauntlet just in time, examining the shattered shards that encased his arm. He thought to himself that failing to block the attack would have caused severe injury. Sophia, her expression calm but impressed, praised him for forming ice armor so swiftly. As the frost crumbled, Dale steadied himself, ready for the next exchange. Sophia beckoned him forward again. Concentrating, Dale pressed his hands into the snowy ground, channeling his mana, and summoned a colossal wall of glittering ice that erupted between them. Sophia recoiled, astonished by the sudden barrier, questioning why he would deploy such a defensive measure mid-combat. She noted the increased density of the ice, a result of enhancing the mana structure, making it incredibly resilient. Curious, she reached out to examine the wall, wondering if he needed a momentary respite. Yet she quickly sensed something unusual in the flow of mana. Observing more closely, she discerned that the wall was infused with a hexagonal mana lattice, a frost explosion, and fragmentation pattern. From behind the barrier, Dale concentrated intensely, issuing a single command. The wall detonated in a blinding burst of blue light, catching Sophia completely off guard. Her face registered pure shock as the explosion engulfed her. When the dust cleared, Dale stood triumphant amidst the remnants of the shattered ice. He recounted his technique, explaining that he had condensed the ice wall, compressing its molecules into a high-density form, effectively transforming it into a powerful explosive. He realized that even his master would have struggled to evade such a spell. As the mist dissipated, his confidence faltered. He spotted a frozen figure resembling Sophia and called out in alarm. The real Sophia appeared beside him, asking if he had spoken, revealing that the frozen figure was merely an illusion. Sophia dispelled the decoy and praised Dale's ingenuity. She gently touched a small cut on her cheek, marveling that a first circle mage had struck an elder of the magic tower. Dale, apologetic, insisted he had never intended to harm her. To his surprise, Sophia smiled warmly, explaining that the wound was a mark of trust, proof that he had unleashed his full power, and as his master, that made her immensely proud. She affectionately ruffled his hair, curious how he had devised such a spell. Dale, beaming, credited all of his success to her teachings. Later, Sophia reported to Duke Alan Saxon. He immediately noticed the cut on her cheek. Sophia admitted that she had been careless while overseeing Dale's practice, acknowledging the remarkable sharpness of his magic. Concerned, the Duke declared that he owed her a debt of gratitude. Sophia brushed off his worry, insisting that training a gifted student like Dale was its own reward. The Duke's expression grew solemn as he revealed further news. Orcs had been sighted crossing the mountain range into their territory. Though a minor threat, he intended to send Dale to confront it. Sophia protested, insisting that Dale was not ready for actual combat. Duke Alan dismissed her concern, clarifying that Dale would not be on the front lines. A powerful dark aura flared around him as he explained that defending their lands was House Saxon's sacred duty, and as heir, Dale must accept that responsibility. Seeing her hesitation, the Duke softened, outlining his plan. He would entrust Dale with a potent artifact from the family's collection and requested that Sophia guide him in mastering its immense power. These artifacts, he explained, contained extraordinary magic and an innate will of their own, drawing upon either the wielder's mana or life force. The greater the artifact's power, the more perilous its use, and a misstep could prove fatal. The scene shifted to Dale, his father, and Sophia walking along a grand marble-lined corridor. The Duke remarked that House Saxon had long since mastered the handling of such potent artifacts. As they approached the family's vault, he turned to his son, officially informing him that, as heir, he must prepare for battle. Dale's initial shock quickly gave way to excitement. Before entering, the Duke laid down a condition. Dale first needed to learn to control the darkness that their family commanded. He pushed open the massive doors, revealing a cavernous chamber brimming with countless artifacts. Dale stood in awe, his gaze scanning the immense collection. The Duke presented the Demon King artifacts, relics their ancestors had safeguarded since conquering the Demon King's domain. He warned his son never to underestimate them. Dale could feel the raw, overwhelming mana emanating from every object. The Duke stressed that each artifact was extremely dangerous and forbade Dale from touching anything until he had learned to control its power. Yet, in that instant, he and Sophia realized Dale was no longer by their side. Panic flared in the Duke's eyes as he spun around, only to find that his son had already wandered into the vault. Dale moved with purpose, scanning the relics for an item worthy of his ambition. The sentient artifacts seemed to call out to him, a shield promising the means to vanquish foes, rings and amulets hinting at untold power. Dale paused, sensing the resonance of his past life's grudges echoing from the objects. With a confident smirk, he dismissed them. None of these were enough. He required something far stronger to exact his revenge. His eyes then fell upon a dark hooded cloak draped over a pedestal. He recognized it instantly as a shadow cloak, a top-tier relic once wielded by Duke Burda of the Demon King army. Its terrifying property allowed the wearer to manifest shadows, making them nearly untouchable in combat. Without hesitation, Dale slipped the cloak over his shoulders. Moments later, his father and Sophia arrived, calling out his name in alarm, but it was too late. Dark tendrils erupted from the cloak, enveloping Dale and pulling him into a shadowy void. A commanding, otherworldly voice echoed within, repeatedly proclaiming its hunger. This was no ordinary shadow. Its former wielder had forged it into a sentient weapon. To master it, the host had to bend the creature entirely to their will. Dale's lips curved into a determined smirk as a monstrous shadow entity descended upon him, beginning the trial of dominance. Outside the void, Duke Alan and Sophia observed anxiety etched into their features as the cloak engulfed Dale, forming an enormous orb of pure darkness. Time stretched on, and the Duke's concern intensified. He explained that if the trial continued unchecked, Dale could lose his mind and be consumed by the shadow. Alarmed, Sophia asked what could be done. The Duke declared they would have to intervene by force. Just as he moved to act, the dark sphere shuddered violently. With an explosive surge, the shadows dispersed, revealing Dale standing unharmed at the center, the cloak now perfectly fitted around him. Calmly, he emerged and answered his father's call. Sophia rushed to his side, her worry evident, asking if he was all right. Dale grinned, reassuring her that he was fine and that the trial had only left a minor sting. His composed demeanor left Sophia astonished. How could a child endure the mental strain of subduing such a malevolent artifact? Having successfully tamed his firsting permission to try on the other artifacts, the audacious proposal left both the Duke and Sophia momentarily speechless. After a long, resigned sigh, the Duke reluctantly consented. Overjoyed, Dale thanked him and dashed deeper into the vault, ready to spend the entire day and night exploring the vast array of powerful relics. A few days later, on the expansive training grounds of the ducal estate, Helmut regarded his nephew with a mixture of astonishment and concern. "Is that truly the shadow cloak you're wearing?" he asked, his voice edged with worry. Dale, brimming with nonchalance, confirmed it with a cheerful nod. Still uneasy, Helmut reminded him that the artifact was notoriously difficult to control. Dale waved off his uncle's apprehension, explaining that aside from a faint tingling sensation, everything was perfectly fine. With a playful grin, Dale offered an imaginative explanation, suggesting the cloak might simply have been lonely. As if on cue, a small, toothy shadow creature slithered from the cloak, circling his feet. Dale claimed it merely wanted companionship. Helmut laughed heartily at the whimsical notion, chiding his nephew for being far too kind-hearted. The shadow creature let out a shrill, indignant screech, and Dale, prideful, thanked his uncle for the compliment before casually pressing his foot onto the creature's head. Once the light-hearted moment passed, Dale proposed a genuine sparring match, requesting real combat practice. Helmut's eyes widened, surprised by the audacity, but his shock quickly melted into exhilaration. The seasoned swordmaster's body shimmered with a powerful blue aura, one of the continent's legendary 7 swordmasters. Dale felt an immediate weight of pressure, yet Helmut, noticing his nephew's hesitation, offered a reassuring smile, promising to use only basic sword techniques without any aura. Dale's expression hardened. He questioned inwardly if his uncle truly intended to hold back, knowing the creed of a knight demanded sincere combat. Yet Dale had a hidden plan. Shadows began creeping from the ground, revealing his true objective: to test the shadow cloak in live combat. The power of the weapons he could form through the cloak's dark entities would determine its actual potential, making this duel a crucial trial. With resolve, Dale struck first, unleashing a rapid volley of shadow blades toward Helmut. Calmly, Helmut swung his massive sword in a single, devastating arc, shattering the projectiles through sheer force. Dale could only watch, awestruck at his uncle's incredible strength, realizing the attack had been nullified by raw physical might alone. Helmut let out a booming laugh, praising the young master's skill before charging forward with blinding speed. Dale nimbly avoided the first swing and countered immediately, manipulating the shadows from his cloak to erupt around Helmut. A barrage of jagged shadow spikes erupted from the ground, aiming to ensnare the swordmaster. Helmut, unperturbed, examined the attack with fascination, grasping a spike in his gauntlet and effortlessly halting it. Dale's eyes widened at the raw strength of his uncle. With a powerful leap, Helmut brought his enormous sword crashing down in a sweeping overhead strike. Dale barely managed to conjure a shadowy shield to absorb the force. The impact was tremendous, sending him skidding backward and gouging the training ground. Helmut, astonished, noted that his nephew had blocked an attack capable of snapping ordinary swords in two. Dale, in turn, recognized the colossal gap between a conventional weapon and the shadow cloak he now wielded. Fired up, Helmut called for 10 more exchanges, and the duel continued with lightning-fast strikes. Observing from the sidelines, the other knights whispered in disbelief, acknowledging that none of them had ever survived more than 2 exchanges against their captain. They felt an overwhelming disparity in skill between themselves and the young master Dale. A few days later, on the eve of deployment, Duchess Elena made a final attempt to dissuade her son. Holding his infant sister in her arms, she pleaded with Dale, insisting she could not let him face such danger. Dale knelt beside her, offering reassurance. He reminded her that his father and Helmut would be present to protect him. Elena remained tense, worry etched into every line of her face. Dale's expression turned solemn. He explained that he needed to grow stronger so that one day he could bear the responsibility of the dukedom. Gently patting his sleeping sister, he elaborated that when the time came, he would require the strength to safeguard her, their mother, and their father. This, he told her, was why he needed the experience now. Looking up with earnest eyes, he implored her to allow him to grow powerful enough to protect them all. Moved by his resolve, Elena's worried expression softened into a tender, approving smile. She relented, granting him permission to go forth. With her blessing, she sent her son on his way. Dale mounted his horse, promising to return safely, determination shining in his eyes. At first light, the temporary military encampment buzzed with activity as the troops assembled. Helmut reported to Duke Alan Saxon that the soldiers were fully prepared. The Duke acknowledged the update, then turned toward his son, surprising Dale by instructing him to give the order to march in his stead. He explained that the prestigious Black Cavalry would one day answer solely to Dale. As his father spoke, Dale felt a profound revelation settle in his chest. These knights were his to command, not the battle-worn legacy of Han Sung from his past life. A renewed sense of purpose surged through him. This would be his inaugural battle as their leader, and he swore to himself that the outcome would be different this time. Riding to the front, Dale lifted his fist and issued a commanding cry, directing the proud swords of House Saxon to advance. In perfect unison, the cavalry raised their lances and voices, their roar echoing like thunder across the snowy expanse. As the troops forged ahead through the forest, the mission details became clear. The force consisted of 250 cavalrymen, reinforced by the elite Winter Wardens. Their target, roughly 1,000 orcs. The strategy called for a preemptive strike by crossing the treacherous, fast-flowing river at its lower reaches and launching a surprise assault. The commander realized there was only one feasible method for all 250 men to traverse the deep water swiftly. At that moment, Sophia appeared, her presence framed by a delicate cascade of magical snowflakes. She instructed the soldiers to step aside and announced that she would conjure a bridge of ice. Dale's heart lifted at the sight of his master, deeply moved by her willingness to assist despite her pacifist principles. With a commanding display of magic, Sophia froze the raging river, crafting a colossal and sturdy bridge of solid ice. She gestured toward her creation, granting passage to the troops. As Duke Alan and Dale rode across, Sophia wished them victory. The Duke expressed his gratitude, while Dale turned back to his master, promising to return safely. Sophia watched silently, a strange warmth tugging at her heart. Tears pricked her eyes, though she smiled fondly, her thoughts lingering on the boy she had trained and the concern he inspired. The battle commenced at the crude orc encampment nestled in a ravine. The ambush erupted as the Winter Warden's elite archers clad in white rained a storm of fire arrows upon the unsuspecting orcs. Flames consumed the camp, sowing chaos and slaughter. One colossal survivor bellowed a furious roar. Seizing the opportunity, Helmut signaled the cavalry to charge. The Black Cavalry formed a lethal wedge, their lances lowered, surging forward with overwhelming force. From a vantage point on a nearby cliff, Duke Alan, Helmut, and Dale observed the skirmish. Helmut turned to the young master, asking for his assessment. Dale analyzed the charge with the precision of a seasoned commander, noting that the lances, empowered by aura in the Kull Lance formation, left the orcs utterly defenseless. He concluded the initial clash was one-sided. His father confirmed that such overwhelming strength was the hallmark of their cavalry. Yet Helmut cautioned against complacency, reminding Dale that this was merely the opening move. On the battlefield, the surviving orcs hastily formed a defensive line, raising shields to block the next assault. Observing the unfolding scene, Helmut decided to pull back, reorganize, and resume with rotating charges. A magical signal fired, and the troops executed a tactical withdrawal, leaving the orcs disoriented. During the retreat, a lone knight was spotted struggling against the enemy. The orcs prepared to impale him, and his horse was struck, throwing him to the ground. Dale's gaze darkened as he murmured a quiet lament for the fallen man. Helmut's voice, cold and resolute, cut through the air, one life down. Dale's mind raced, unable to reconcile their detachment. Horror washed over him as a massive orc advanced toward the downed knight, axe raised. Realizing he had only one chance, Dale adjusted his approach. Orc hide was far tougher than typical creatures, and the standard ice bolt formula would not suffice. With quick calculations, he incorporated a high-precision sniping enhancement and a ballistic trajectory adjustment for maximum stability. Summoning a complex magic circle, Dale focused his mana and prepared a spell he named Ice Bolt Barret M98B. Just as the orc raised its weapon, Dale unleashed the spell. A brilliant concentrated beam of ice shot across the battlefield, striking the orc's head with lethal precision. From their cliffside observation, Duke Allen and Helmut were left stunned into silence. The Duke could only remark on the remarkable accuracy displayed from such a distance, witnessing firsthand the deadly potential of his son's ingenuity. Suddenly, Dale urged his horse forward, plunging directly into the chaos of the battlefield. Helmut shouted a warning, but Duke Allen raised a hand to stop him, his voice calm yet commanding. "Let him be," he said, a proud, knowing smile gracing his face. The Duke marveled at his son's ingenuity, crafting an original, devastating magical formula at such a young age, a testament to the sophistication of Dale's inner world. On the ground, Dale quickly surveyed the rapidly shifting battlefield. The remaining orcs were regrouping, and two problems immediately presented themselves. The fallen knight had yet to recover, frozen by fear, and Dale realized that his powerful ice formula was too cumbersome for close combat. He needed to simplify it, to condense the spell like reducing a complex equation. As the next orc surged forward, Dale reworked the formula, streamlining it further into a faster, more precise attack. With a confident smirk, he unleashed his newly forged creation, Ice Bullet. The spell shot forth from his galloping horse, striking the oncoming orc directly in the head. A spray of blood and gore erupted as the body crumpled before the stunned knight. The warrior looked up in disbelief, recognizing his young master and silently questioning why Dale would risk himself on his behalf. Calmly dismounting, Dale offered a reassuring smile. "Do not fear. The Saxon sword never abandons its loyal." The knight's eyes glistened with gratitude, but there was little time to dwell on emotion. More orcs surged forward. Unfazed, Dale raised his hand, channeling the formidable power of his shadow cloak. A swirling aura of deep purple energy enveloped him, and he unleashed Shadow Blade. Dark tendrils erupted from the earth, slicing effortlessly through the charging orcs. A grim, satisfied smile appeared on his face as he issued the final command, directing the shadows to consume their prey. One lone orc stared in confusion before a massive vortex of pure darkness enveloped it completely. Shadows lashed out with lethal precision. A tendril decapitated one orc, while another shadow beast tore into its companion, leaving only trembling terror behind. In a horrifying display, the creature consumed its victim entirely, leaving a skeletal husk. Turning to the last surviving orc, Dale greeted it with an almost cheerful smile before firing another ice bullet, eliminating the final threat. He wiped a smear of blood from his cheek and turned to the rescued knight. "It's done," he said. The knight, still reeling from the events, could only stammer Dale's name, admitting that his legs refused to obey. With a faint, strained smile, Dale hoisted the grown man effortlessly into his arms. "We made it," he said brightly, exuding calm confidence. Just then, Helmut arrived with the remainder of the black cavalry. Dale glanced at his uncle. "I'll leave the rest to you," he said. Inspired, Helmut rallied the cavalry, sending them charging charging with renewed ferocity. The knights thundered across the field, their loyalty to House Saxon and to their young master Dale resounding in every war cry. Back at the Saxon encampment, the Orc incursion was declared crushed. Duke Alan summoned his son to the command tent, his expression stern. "Explain why you charged alone into the enemy lines," he demanded, voice sharp with reproach. Dale was momentarily bewildered. He had saved a life. Why the reprimand? Inside the tent, Duke Alan's gaze bore into him as he demanded an answer. Dale responded respectfully, stating that he acted to fulfill his future responsibility, reminding his father that these knights were the men he would one day lead. The Duke's eyes narrowed. "Your reasoning is weak," he said, unconvinced. Dale's mind raced, trying to comprehend his father's cold assessment. Gathering his courage, he asked, "Father, why did you stand by and watch one of our own fall?" Duke Alan's expression hardened. "This domain faces constant threats. Knights cannot wait for salvation. They must endure or perish. By rushing to the rescue, you risk planting a dangerous belief that someone will always save them," he continued, his tone severe yet measured. "How many knights clinging to dependency could survive on a true battlefield? Our duty is to sharpen blades, to push ourselves to the limit. Only then will I, as their lord, intervene. That is the weight of House Saxon's legacy." Dale listened, recognizing the cold logic in his father's words, a truth he had forgotten in his new life. As the lesson sank in, Duke Alan's demeanor softened. He placed a hand on Dale's shoulder. "I am impressed by your resolve. Never lose that spirit," he said. Dale acknowledged the guidance with a firm, respectful salute. With the fatherly instruction complete, Duke Alan declared it was time for his son to return to the castle. The tale of Dale rescuing the fallen knight quickly became the subject of heated gossip, rapidly growing into an exaggerated legend claiming he had single-handedly slain 1,000 orcs. Dale, deeply embarrassed by such wild stories, could only attempt to hide his reddening face. A few days later, at the training grounds, Dale was met with a line of knights kneeling in respect, their reverence almost overwhelming. Flustered, he tried to insist that such formality was unnecessary. At that moment, Helmet appeared, grinning broadly, proudly urging his nephew to stand tall. Rallying the knights, Helmet proclaimed they must all grow stronger for their young master, and the assembled warriors roared their agreement. Dale could only respond with an awkward, self-conscious smile, touched by their unwavering devotion. A maid soon announced the arrival of guests from House Orhart. Helmet prepared to escort Dale to meet them, and Dale recognized the significance immediately. House Orhart, once a noble house of the fallen Teutonia kingdom destroyed by the Empire, was led by the legendary divine sword, Bardel. Observing his uncle, Dale noticed a subtle change in Helmet's expression, realizing he was recalling the revered figure who had guided him into knighthood. Aware the meeting could be tense, Dale and Helmet cautiously peered into the throne room. Duke Alan and Duchess Eleanor were seated, awaiting the visitors. An attendant announced the guests, and the Duke instructed Dale and Helmet to escort them inside. A woman dressed in formal attire, her face partially hidden beneath a veiled hat, entered with a young blonde-haired girl. She introduced herself as Vanessa Orhart, bowing respectfully to Duke Saxon, then presented her daughter, Charlotte Orhart. The young girl's expression was fiery and defiant, and Dale sensed the sudden tension immediately. Charlotte confronted her mother angrily, demanding to know why she was showing deference, but Vanessa attempted to calm her. Duke Alan intervened smoothly, displaying understanding for Vanessa's hardships. To diffuse the awkwardness, he asked Dale to escort Lady Charlotte around the castle. Dale, polite and composed, offered his hand with a gentle smile, inviting her to follow him. Charlotte, however, recoiled with a sharp slap, warning him not to touch her. Dale was momentarily stunned by the hostile response, and the sudden outburst left the throne room in shocked silence. Vanessa hurried forward, scolding her daughter and demanding an apology, but Charlotte ignored her, letting out a frustrated cry before storming from the room, slamming the door behind her. In the tense quiet, Vanessa apologized profusely for her daughter's behavior, explaining that recent events had left her emotionally shaken. Duchess Elena, concerned, inquired further. Vanessa revealed that a new overseer, Count Brandenburg, known as the Pig King, had been assigned to their lands. In his twisted pursuit of an heir, he preyed upon skilled swordsmen, and his vile obsession had extended even to young Charlotte. She had barely escaped his grasp, but the traumatic memory remained vivid. Vanessa concluded, pleading with the Duke to take her daughter under the protection of House Saxon, ensuring Brandenburg could never harm her again. Meanwhile, Dale found Charlotte wandering the training grounds. He called to her and she turned, still visibly upset. He asked if she knew where she was headed, but she replied defiantly that she did not care. With a friendly smile, he inquired about her hand, bruised from the earlier slap, and she confirmed it was fine. Observing her, Dale noticed traces of tears and recognized that beneath her abrasive exterior, she was still a frightened child. Suddenly, Charlotte's demeanor shifted entirely. Her eyes blazed with determination as she drew her sword with swift precision. She challenged Dale, commanding the young master of House Saxon to engage her in a duel. Dale stood frozen for a moment, astonished by the boldness and aggression of her demand. On the snow-covered training grounds, Charlotte leveled her blade at him, insisting he fight. Dale, however, responded with a confident smirk, teasing her for a reason, referencing the tale of the man reputed to have slain 1,000 orcs to save a single knight. Charlotte, however, was not amused. She declared her intent to defeat him, the one said to be unbeatable, to prove her own strength to the world and demonstrate that she could protect her house from any threat. When Dale questioned her, learning she named Count Brandenburg, the so-called Holy Swordsman, as her greatest adversary, a wave of pure rage washed over him. Memories of Brandenburg, the Empire's traitorous agent who had killed him in his previous life, surged through him. Despite the fury, Dale's strategic mind took hold. Seeing that they shared a common enemy, he realized Charlotte could become a valuable ally, but first, she would need a dose of reality. With a fluid motion, Dale turned on his heel and strode toward a barrel of practice swords, leaving Charlotte momentarily perplexed. He retrieved a short sword, turning back with a faintly condescending smirk, remarking that she was still just a child, naive and inexperienced. Then, with a casual challenge, he invited her to attack with everything she possessed. Incensed, Charlotte gritted her teeth and lunged, her rapier glowing with a faint green aura as she unleashed a potent strike. To her astonishment, Dale effortlessly intercepted the blow with his modest training blade. Their swords clashed repeatedly, sparks flying as Charlotte's frustration grew. She launched a relentless barrage, but Dale met each strike with calm precision, reading her movements like an open book. As they dueled, Dale studied her technique. He noted her skillful deflections, precise wrist flicks, and the subtle aura she channeled, using it to compensate for wielding a weapon far too heavy for her frame. The duel intensified, both combatants pressing their limits. Charlotte, tapping deeper into her aura, pushed beyond normal human capacity. Their blades collided with a burst of energy, sliding both warriors backward. Dale could not help but admire her. She was a true knight. Sensing a potential advantage in raw swordsmanship, Charlotte's lips curved into a confident smile as she renewed her assault. She lunged with a precise stab which Dale barely deflected, pressing her offensive with renewed vigor. Her aura crackled around her, fueling her belief that she had gained the upper hand. Memories surged within her. Her father, the legendary divine sword, had been gone before her birth, but her mother's stories of his legacy had instilled in her a profound sense of duty to safeguard their house. Even after the kingdom's fall, her training had never ceased, and that memory now fueled her fervent attacks. Yet, Dale continued to effortlessly counter her every move. Sensing her desperation, Charlotte unleashed a final furious strike, a cry of frustration escaping her lips. With ease, Dale parried and executed a single decisive counter, knocking her rapier from her grasp. Defeated, Charlotte sank to her knees in the snow, staring at her fallen blade, tears forming as she demanded to know why she could not win. Dale's response was simple, piercing, and absolute. She could not triumph because she was not the divine sword himself. His tone softened slightly as he reassured her that her pride and determination as his daughter were admirable, but he delivered the hard truth. In her current state, she could not hope to protect her house from Count Brandenburg. The words struck deep, and tears flowed freely as she admitted the enormity of her enemy's strength. Looking up at Dale with tear-streaked eyes, she asked what she should do. Dale's voice took on solemn weight. He, Dale of House Saxon, swore by his family name to serve as the guardian of House Orhak. Charlotte could only gape, stunned and bewildered by the unexpected vow. Holding her rapier, Dale made a solemn promise. Until the day she became strong enough to defeat Count Brandenburg herself, he and all of House Saxon would act as her shield. Charlotte questioned his motives. Dale extended her sword toward her and answered simply it was because her blade and what it represented was worth protecting. He then gave her a condition, requesting she swear to serve as a sword for him and for House Saxon. After a moment of thought, a small, determined smile broke across Charlotte's face, and she accepted, kneeling to take her own oath. She raised her voice, solemn and unwavering, and declared, "I, Charlotte Orhart, swear upon my honor as a knight." Though it might have appeared a youthful promise, the determination and gravity behind their words were undeniable, forging a true and unbreakable pact upon the snow-dusted training grounds. Later that afternoon, within the stately office of Duke Alan Saxon, the matter was formally resolved. At Lady Vanessa's request, Charlotte was officially inducted as a maid of House Saxon. The Duke's eyes widened in mild astonishment at how readily his son had accepted the arrangement. "Curious," he inquired, "what transpired between you and the girl?" Dale recounted the events succinctly, explaining that he and Charlotte had exchanged solemn promises, invoking the name of House Saxon to bind their oaths. The Duke's face darkened, a hint of reproach in his tone as he asked, "Did you call upon our family name merely out of pity?" Dale's reply was firm, unwavering. "No, father, I did not." He continued, outlining his rationale with measured confidence. Charlotte, he explained, was the sole descendant of the legendary divine sword, possessing extraordinary potential. By forging a new pact, they had secured a formidable ally for the future. His true goal, he declared, was to cultivate a new wielder of the divine sword, one who would eventually serve the interests of their duchy. Duke Alan, initially surprised by his son's strategic foresight and ambition, soon allowed a proud, approving smile to grace his features. "Good," he said simply, his voice carrying both satisfaction and quiet pride. Dale, inwardly pleased, reflected that with the last scion of the divine sword's lineage now under House Saxon's roof, he had dealt a significant blow to that wretched Brandenburg. The scene then shifted to Malberg, the former capital of the Teutonia kingdom. Within the imposing walls of Count Brandenburg's castle, the Count was seething with rage. He slammed a wineglass onto his desk, shards scattering, and demanded furiously to know how the insolent Duke Saxon had dared to move first and claim Charlotte. A subordinate bowed nervously, offering a meek apology. Brandenburg's fist crashed against the desk in fury as he berated his men, condemning them as incompetent fools unable to capture a single young girl. The subordinate stammered that assassins had been dispatched but were all slain before reaching the Saxon estate, adding that it was suspected Charlotte Orhart herself had fended them off. Disgusted, Brandenburg dismissed his men with a wave of his hand, deeming them utterly useless. He strode toward a magnificent sword displayed prominently in the room, resting a hand on its hilt while reminiscing about past triumphs. A flash of memory revealed his treachery, the dark moment he had stabbed Hanong in the back. In the present, he held the holy sword Durandal and addressed it with a twisted reverence. With a disturbing, leering smile, he called Charlotte his beloved fiancée and whispered to the blade that it must wait just a little longer. Licking the steel, he swore he would secure the perfect heir to inherit the sword, no matter the cost. Turning to his subordinate, Brandenburg issued a new ruthless command. He ordered contact with the Thieves' Guild, instructing them to send their operatives into Duke Saxon's territory. With a cold, sinister grin, he promised to pay whatever the rogues demanded, commanding them to capture the wretched Charlotte Orhart at any price. A week had passed quietly since Charlotte pledged her oath. Having adapted to her new role, she endured the rigorous discipline of maid training while incorporating daily sparring sessions with Dale into her routine. On the training grounds, Helmut presided as referee, his composed voice resonating through the courtyard as he asked if both combatants were prepared. Dale responded confidently, while Charlotte gave a brief grunt of affirmation, her lips curling into a faint but eager smile. At Helmut's command to begin, their blades clashed in an instant, the sharp ring of steel echoing in the air. Dale's movements were swift and fluid, his twin short swords weaving a deadly pattern as he pressed forward. Charlotte met his relentless strikes with steady precision, her focus unwavering. Helmut observed them in silence, a flicker of disbelief crossing his usually calm expression. Were these truly children before him? Their speed, intensity, and lethal intent spoke of fighters far beyond their years. The duel continued in a blur of motion until Dale suddenly drew his cloak forward, concealing his sword. The deceptive feint caught Charlotte momentarily off guard, irritation flashing in her eyes. Before she could retaliate with full force, Helmut intervened, appearing between them in a blink, his hand catching her wrist as her blade halted mere inches from Dale's cheek. With composed authority, Helmut commended both of them, calling it an excellent exchange. But Charlotte brushed off the praise as hollow, demanding to know what she still lacked. He asked if she understood the rapier's true nature. Thrusting, she answered firmly. Helmut shook his head. No, the rapier's essence lies not in its thrust but in its footwork. He analyzed their final exchange, pointing out how Dale had sidestepped her strike and closed the distance. At that moment, he explained, you should have widened your stance and reset your range. The farther you extend your arm with a rapier, the more unstable it becomes, sacrificing both precision and strength. His verdict was clear. Charlotte would need to rebuild her fundamentals from the ground up. The declaration struck her hard, leaving her silent and indignant. When she retorted that she'd never had a proper teacher, Helmut merely smiled. You do now, he said, vowing to correct her peculiar stance. Much to her outrage, Dale tried to mediate as her temper flared, but Helmut only chuckled, teasing that she looked rather adorable when angry. Their light bickering carried on, while Dale quietly observed from the sidelines. He could sense the raw potential within Charlotte, wondering how far she might ascend under the guidance of a true sword master. At the same time, he reminded himself that he too had much farther to go. The scene then shifted to his magic lessons under Sophia. She was explaining the arduous process of forming mana circles, a task that took decades for most mages, yet Dale had advanced with astonishing speed. When Sophia asked, astonished, whether he had already completed his second circle, Dale calmly confirmed it. The strength of a mage's circle was measured in revolutions per minute, RPM. Where a typical first circle mage managed around 300 revolutions per minute, Dale's first had reached an incredible 2,000. His second circle was already spinning at 400 revolutions per minute, enough to begin forming a third. Curious to test the extent of his newfound power, Dale began refining his ice bullet spell. He focused on reinforcing its molecular structure, increasing its density and hardness, and projecting a magical barrel to accelerate its rotation and speed. Fixing his eyes on a distant tree, he unleashed his spell, Ice Bullet Armor-Piercing Round. The projectile tore through the air with devastating force, striking its target before detonating into a violent burst of freezing energy. When the icy mist dispersed, only a crater remained. Sophia stared in disbelief. What in the world? She murmured. Dale remained composed, quietly analyzing the results and noting how the second circle had multiplied the spell's power. Sophia's astonishment softened into pride. Your progress is extraordinary, she said warmly. He replied modestly, It's only because of your guidance. For a moment, her expression softened. Remembering the night he'd saved everyone and his selfless resolve since then, Sophia felt a surge of affection. Without warning, she stepped forward and pulled him into a gentle embrace. You truly are my proud student, she whispered. The sudden closeness caught Dale off guard. His cheeks flushed crimson, his mature mind from another life scrambling to comprehend the awkward warmth of the moment. The next dawn found him alone in the courtyard, pale light washing over him as he practiced in silence. He still couldn't shake the memory of Sophia's unexpected hug. She probably just sees me as a child, he muttered, shaking his head before focusing on his training. Summoning a jagged ice wall before him, he prepared a new variation of his spell, a shotgun pattern. Ice bullet, 12-gauge, 00 buckshot. The main projectile shattered midair, scattering into dozens of smaller shards that tore into the ice wall in rapid bursts. The fragments ricocheted toward him, but Dale calmly summoned a hexagonal barrier, deflecting them with practiced ease. Satisfied, he smiled faintly and made a note to attempt a slug round next time. Just then, a familiar voice called out his name. Turning toward it, Dale saw Charlotte emerging from between the snow-laden trees. She remarked that she had finally discovered where he had been training. Dale asked if she had been practicing as well, and she nodded, explaining that she had been working on the footwork Sir Helmut had taught her. Dale commented that she seemed to genuinely enjoy swordsmanship. The observation caught Charlotte slightly off guard, but after a pause, she nodded in quiet agreement. A brief silence followed before she hesitated, clearly trying to bring up something that had been weighing on her mind. After fumbling for words, she finally blurted out an apology, admitting that she had behaved rudely and had spent the past few days reflecting on her conduct. True to his blunt nature, Dale agreed that she had indeed been quite rude, leaving her momentarily frozen in disbelief. Then, his serious expression broke into a bright grin as he added cheerfully that he would forgive her this time, and that there was no need to be so formal with him. Relieved, Charlotte let out a soft laugh and nodded. The two stood side by side in the quiet, snow-covered forest. Charlotte looked around and remarked that she truly loved the weather there. She said she could swing her sword until late into the night, and the cool air would always soothe her body. Dale listened silently, his gaze softening as Charlotte smiled, her words resonating with something deep within him. Sharing that unspoken understanding, he returned her smile. In that tranquil winter stillness, the two shared a rare, peaceful moment beneath the gently falling snow. From the grand balcony of the ducal castle, Duke Alan and Duchess Elena watched quietly as their son trained below. The soft afternoon light bathed the courtyard in a golden hue. Elena's voice carried a wistful note as she remarked on how quickly time had passed, realizing just how much their son had grown. Duke Alan agreed, his gaze both proud and gentle, noting how natural Dale and Charlotte looked together, their bond seeming effortless and genuine. With warm smiles, the couple decided to simply watch over them. Elena believed it was a mother's duty to quietly support her son in following the path of his true feelings. Before long, the setting shifted to the city slums, a place of cracked stone streets and fading hope. Dale explained that his mother, Duchess Elena, had long dedicated herself to helping the poor, providing food, clothing, and work for those in need. This year, both he and Charlotte had joined her charitable efforts, accompanying her on each visit to the slums. During one such visit, a frantic boy suddenly rushed toward Charlotte. His face was streaked with tears, his voice trembling as he begged for help. He cried that his mother was in danger and pleaded for Charlotte to come with him immediately. Concern flashed across Charlotte's expression, and without hesitation she agreed to follow him, Dale close behind. As they ventured deeper into the winding alleys, Dale's instincts stirred uneasily. The streets grew narrower and dimmer, their footsteps echoing in eerie silence. He noticed how far they had strayed from their escort nights, and a chill of suspicion crept into his chest. Why had the boy sought Charlotte, a child, rather than asking any adult for help? The inconsistency struck him like a warning bell. Scanning their surroundings, Dale's sharp gaze caught movement atop a nearby rooftop. A hooded man was watching them. His eyes narrowed as he spotted a faint emblem stitched onto the man's sleeve, the mark of the Thieves' Guild, subordinates of Count Brandenburg. Cold realization settled over him. Their target was Charlotte. The trap could not have been more obvious. The boy led them into a desolate alleyway, then hesitated and muttered that he would go fetch his mother. The moment he vanished into the shadows, several cloaked figures emerged, surrounding Dale and Charlotte in a tightening circle. Their green-haired leader stepped forward, a mocking smirk twisting his lips. "What are two noble children doing in a place like this?" he sneered, his tone dripping with contempt. He added coldly that they only needed the girl, and it would be wise for Dale to leave while he still could. Dale did not move. A faint, confident smile curved across his face, calm yet chillingly resolute. Stepping in front of Charlotte, he stood firm, the air around him sharpening with silent intent. He reaffirmed his vow in his heart. He, Dale of House Saxon, would protect the daughter of House Orhat. The leader chuckled darkly, calling Dale's resolve noble but foolish. With a cruel grin, he warned that the boys should learn what the real world was like. Around him, the thugs unsheathed their daggers, their blades glinting in the dim light. Charlotte leaned closer, whispering nervously that she had left her sword behind. Dale's voice remained calm and steady as he told her not to worry. Inwardly, he thought, "This is the perfect chance to test my new self-defense technique." Then, just as the assassins sprang from the rooftops to strike, the air erupted with violence. From Dale's shadow cloak burst a swirling tempest of dark violet energy, pulsing with fierce, unrestrained power. The explosion of force sent a shockwave rippling through the alley, hurling several attackers backward. The green-haired leader's eyes widened, his instinct screaming danger. "Move!" he barked, leaping aside just in time. Dale's gaze remained calm and analytical as he studied the man's quick reaction. Fast, he noted inwardly, Probably a high-ranking thief, but not fast enough. One unfortunate assassin failed to dodge in time. The vortex caught him mid-air, dragging him into its churning mass of darkness. Dale's eyes gleamed faintly as he observed the spell's effect unfold. This was his newest creation, an experimental technique developed after forming his second mana circle. By weaving parasitic shadow entities into the very currents of the wind, he had created a spell that turned motion itself into a weapon. The results were immediate and horrifying. From within the vortex, a grotesque fanged creature of pure shadow emerged, twisting and coiling like sentient darkness. It lunged at the trapped assassin, merging with his body. A scream tore through the alley as the man convulsed, his life force devoured from within, until only a hollow, undead shell remained. The sight froze the rest of the thieves in place, terror etched across their faces. The shadows surrounding Dale grew thicker, darker, gathering into a colossal form. A monstrous corpse-like figure took shape, a towering being of sinew and shadow, its claws long as blades, its eyes burning with violet light. When it opened its maw, an ear-splitting shriek ripped through the night, shaking the alley walls. One of the men gasped, his voice trembling. "You undead!" The others staggered back, feeling the creature's oppressive aura press down on them like a physical weight. Fear clawed at their minds. The leader's jaw tightened. "Attack!" he roared. Despite their trembling, the men obeyed, rushing forward with desperate cries. Snarling at their hesitation, the leader cursed and decided to act himself. He vanished in a blur of green light, reappearing as a dozen phantom images that encircled Dale from every direction. "Let's see you block this noble brat," he hissed. His hands flicked, launching a storm of glowing daggers infused with toxic green aura, but Dale didn't move. The shadows at his feet surged upward, solidifying into a spiraling barrier. Each dagger struck and shattered harmlessly, scattering into sparks against the impenetrable defense. The leader's grin faded, disbelief twisting his face. "Impossible!" Dale's eyes narrowed. "My turn." A radiant blue magic circle flared beneath his feet, cold air crackling around him. Ice bullet, double-barreled, 12-gauge buckshot. He fired. A thunderous blast of freezing energy tore through the air, unleashing a spread of high-velocity ice projectiles. The volley struck the leader mid-leap, ripping through his limbs and chest, hurling him violently into the ground. Charlotte, peering from behind a crumbling wall, called out in shock. "Dale!" The alley had become a frozen graveyard. Blood stained the stones. Bodies lay motionless, and in the center stood Dale, silent, unshaken. His summoned undead knelt beside a corpse, tearing into flesh with mechanical savagery. The green-haired leader coughed blood, struggling to his knees. Dale watched with detached interest. So he's an aura wielder, tougher than the rest. The thief glared at him, defiance burning in his fading eyes. "It's not over." Before he could move, Dale raised his hand. The shadow cloak flared once more, tendrils of darkness bursting outward in a violent storm. The whips of energy sliced through the remaining assassins in a blur of motion. The undead beast joined the carnage, seizing a fleeing man and crushing him into silence. Its roar, deep, monstrous, hungry, echoed through the alleyway like the sound of death itself. When the chaos finally ceased, the silence was deafening. Dale turned, his calm expression softening as he approached Charlotte, who sat trembling against a wall. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently. She shook her head, her voice barely audible. I'm fine." Then came a faint, ragged sound. The last surviving assassin, wounded and terrified, crawled across the ground, dragging his mangled leg. He screamed as he tried to flee. Without hesitation, Dale conjured a shard of ice beneath his foot and flicked it forward. The projectile shot through the air, impaling the man's leg and pinning him to the cobblestone. The undead creature lumbered closer, its shadow swallowing the light around it. "Wait, please," the man begged. "I'll tell you everything. Everything I know." Dale regarded him coldly. "Everything." The man nodded frantically, desperation twisting his voice. But Dale's expression didn't change. To him, the man's words were meaningless. Without another word, he lifted his hand. A single ice bullet shot forward, piercing the man's skull cleanly. The body slumped to the blood-soaked ground, lifeless. Standing still, Dale looked down at the corpse, his tone quiet and emotionless. "I wasn't particularly interested." The alley grew silent once more, as darkness swallowed the blood-stained street, leaving behind only stillness. and the trembling form of Charlotte. Standing amidst the carnage, Dale exhaled softly, his voice low yet steady. He told her that what she had witnessed, the merciless might that had destroyed their attackers, was the true face of House Saxon, a power both fearsome and necessary. The same power, he said, that would forever exist to protect her. When he asked if she was frightened, Charlotte hesitated before answering with quiet honesty. A little, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But then, with a faint smile, she added, "It's all right, because you did it for me." Her trembling ceased as she met his gaze, eyes clear and resolute. Once more she repeated the vow she had made in the past, that if his family would stand as her shield, then she would become his sword. Determination flared within her, burning away the fear. She thanked him for showing her a future worth believing in, a path she wished to walk at his side. She swore to become stronger, no matter what it required. Dale watched her in silence, a faint stir echoing within his chest, a mixture of pride, sorrow, and something deeper he could not name. He realized then that his decision to accept Charlotte had not stemmed solely from her potential. Somewhere within him lingered the guilt of a man he had slain in a former life, Sir Bardell. Her words about becoming his sword carried a meaning far heavier than even she understood. Far away in the cold heart of Brandenburg Castle, Count Brandenburg slammed his fist against his desk. The impact rattled the ink bottle beside a sealed letter, an official summons marked with the sigil of House Saxon. His lips twisted in disgust. An invitation from the Black Duke himself. The Count's jaw clenched as he muttered a curse under his breath. He knew he couldn't refuse. The Duke's authority was absolute. Even the Emperor's sword could not defy a direct command from the ruler of Saxon. Days later, Count Brandenburg arrived at Saxon Castle, its towering gates opening to reveal the grand hall beyond. At its center sat Duke Alan Saxon, composed and unreadable upon his obsidian throne. Standing at his right was Dale, the young heir, calm and confident. Count Brandenburg, the Duke greeted coolly, his tone polite yet edged with power. The Count offered a mocking bow, his voice laced with venomous courtesy. "Why, Your Grace, what could be more urgent than a personal summons from the illustrious Duke of Saxon himself?" Inwardly, he sneered. Cunning little vipers, the both of them, he thought, his gaze flicking toward Dale and Charlotte. The Duke's expression remained unchanged. "The Empire," he said evenly, "has expressed great concern over the kidnapping attempt that occurred within my territory." Then his eyes sharpened. "I believe you already understand why you were summoned." Brandenburg chuckled bitterly, feigning ignorance. "Surely your Grace doesn't suspect the Emperor's loyal sword of such a disgraceful act?" But as the final word left his mouth, the air shifted. A heavy, suffocating pressure filled the chamber. Darkness pooled at the Duke's feet and began to spread, an unseen tide of power. The chandeliers trembled, their light flickering wildly as the temperature plummeted. Brandenburg froze. His knights glanced around, panic spreading like wildfire. "Why is there wind inside the hall?" one whispered, before his voice turned into a scream. The shadows had come alive. They slithered and coiled like serpents, wrapping around the knights. One by one the men vanished, consumed by the abyss. Their terrified cries were swallowed whole, leaving only echoes behind. Brandenburg's breath hitched. His proud Magdalena order, the finest of his house, was gone, obliterated in seconds. His mind reeled. This is ancient magic, forbidden magic. The name surfaced in his mind with a chill of recognition. Ray's Tempest, a legendary spell from the Age of Shadow Monarchs, and Duke Alan Saxon was casting it flawlessly. Then the Duke's voice cut through the chaos, calm, controlled, and absolute. "Count Brandenburg, kneel." The command struck harder than any blow. Brandenburg's pride flared in defiance. "You dare," he began, but the Duke's gaze silenced him. "Didn't you hear me?" Alan said quietly. The weight of his aura intensified, pressing down like a mountain. "There won't be a next time." The Count's body trembled against the crushing force. His knees hit the cold marble floor with a dull echo. Rage burned in his veins, humiliation searing his pride. Me, the Emperor's holy sword, kneeling before this demon Duke. The Duke regarded him from above, eyes glacial and merciless. "Do not mistake my restraint for weakness," he said. "This meeting was granted for the sake of peace." Then his tone darkened, each word sharp enough to wound. "But hear this. Should you ever lay a hand on the children of Saxon again, I will personally erase every last trace of the Brandenburg name from this world." The threat hung heavy in the air, more terrifying than any spell. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then, leaning back in his throne, the Duke spoke once more, his voice dripping with cold irony. "Now, Count, before you depart, Feel free to warm yourself by the fire. I wouldn't want you catching a chill." Brandenburg forced a strained smile, his fury hidden behind feigned composure. "Your generosity is overwhelming, Your Grace," he said bitterly, "but I believe I've overstayed my welcome." With a dismissive flick of his hand, the Duke replied, "You may go." As Dale stood beside his father, silent and unmoving, yet his thoughts surged beneath the calm surface like a storm-tossed sea. He watched every moment unfold, the humiliation of Count Brandenburg, the oppressive weight of his father's power filling the grand hall, and he understood what it signified. The Black Duke had just forced one of the Emperor's most loyal vassals to kneel. That single act would ripple across the empire like wildfire, a scandal that would echo through every noble court and royal chamber. It was more than a display of dominance. It was a declaration, a warning. Dale's eyes hardened. This was the spark that would ignite the coming tempest. The balance of the empire would shatter, and when that day arrived, their role would be unmistakable: to sever the head of the so-called Sword of Sanctity and reshape the fate of the realm itself. By the time word of Count Brandenburg's humiliation reached the far corners of the empire, Duke Alan Saxon was already seated within his study. The air was thick with silence, heavy enough to still the ticking of the clock. Before him lay several corpses, the mangled remains of the thieves who had dared to strike at Dale. The metallic scent of blood hung faintly in the air. Standing across from the Duke was Sophia, the renowned instructor, whose expression remained calm, yet her eyes reflected unease. "So," she murmured softly, "these men were felled by the young master?" The Duke inclined his head. "Yes," he replied, his tone even, almost proud. "Every last one." Sophia's gaze lingered on the lifeless bodies. Her thoughts wavered, a shadow of doubt flickering through her mind. Had her teachings led him too far? Had her lessons bred not restraint, but ruthlessness? Sensing her silent turmoil, Duke Alan spoke again. "You fear he has strayed," he said, his voice measured but firm. "But his gift is unlike any other. If we are to guide that power, it will require not control, but understanding. And for that, I need your wisdom." Her eyes lifted to meet his as he continued. "I want you to serve House Saxon, not merely as his instructor, but as its chief advisor." The words left her momentarily speechless. To accept such a position meant far more than an honor. It was a binding oath. To stand with the Saxons was to step into their shadow and share in their destiny. The Duke leaned back, his expression softening just slightly. "Dale relies on you," he said quietly, "more than he realizes. His potential has already begun to surpass even my reach. To shape him, to teach him how to wield his strength without losing himself, that will fall to you." A long silence passed between them. Then, with a steady breath, Sophia nodded. "Very well," she said at last. "I will accept." Her tone carried both resolve and resignation. She understood the gravity of her choice. From that moment onward, she would no longer merely instruct Dale Saxon. She would walk beside him, deciphering the depths of his thoughts, his instincts, and the cold, calculating logic that drove him. Time flowed swiftly, and soon the day of Dale's 10th birthday arrived, a grand celebration held in the opulent banquet hall of House Saxon. Yet this year's gathering carried a different air. Among the noble guests stood several figures aligned with the Emperor's faction, their presence an unspoken message. The most distinguished among them was Marquis Juris, whose arrival drew every gaze. The Duke welcomed him with due respect, and the Marquis stepped forward, offering a courteous greeting to the young lord. As laughter and music filled the hall, the guests praised the splendor of the feast, the aroma of fine dishes, the glittering decor, and the Duke's hospitality. They whispered in admiration, remarking that such magnificence was astonishing for a province so distant from the imperial capital. Their earlier doubts about the northern duchy's prosperity now seemed unfounded. Standing amid the polite chatter, Dale silently observed the scene. He recognized these guests for what they were, the Empire's central nobles, the very core of the Emperor's faction. Their attendance was not an act of goodwill, but a veiled reminder. It was a warning from the imperial family, a sign that they had not forgotten the humiliation of Count Brandenburg, the Sword of Sanctity, and at the heart of this message stood the Emperor's emissary, Marquis Juris, the Crimson Lord. The Marquis studied Dale with a faint smile. "So this is young Lord Dale," he said, his voice smooth yet probing. He introduced himself with pride, the head of the Red Magic Tower, the institution that worshipped power above all, embodying the creed of might makes right. Dale's expression remained calm, though his heart stirred with memory. In his previous life, he had suffered under the Red Tower's cruelty, subjected to forced magical experiments that scarred both body and soul. Eurus continued with polite conversation, claiming to have heard of the prodigious young heir whose magical talent surpassed all others in the Empire. He mentioned rumors that at only 9 years of age, Dale had annihilated an entire orc horde to protect a knight of his household. Truly worthy of the Duke's lineage. The Marquis concluded with a courteous nod. Dale responded with a faint, polite smile. Your words honor me, my lord. Please enjoy the celebration. With that, he turned away, feeling the weight of the nobles' stares on his back. Each year, these formalities felt more suffocating. He thought wistfully of training with Charlotte instead. Yet her new position as a lady-in-waiting to his mother made that impossible, and worse, her identity as the daughter of the sword god made secrecy essential. Just as he drifted toward the terrace for air, a sharp scream tore through the festive music. A man's harsh voice followed, shouting at a disobedient maid. Dale's expression hardened as he traced the commotion to a dim corridor. There he saw a corpulent noble pressing a terrified maid Eve to the floor, his face flushed with drunken rage. Let go, she pleaded. I serve House Saxon. The man sneered. How dare a filthy servant speak that name? It's the young lord's birthday, everyone's celebrating, and you'd spoil the mood? His lips twisted into a cruel grin. Better you entertain us instead. Dale's eyes turned cold as he stepped forward. What exactly do you think you're doing? The man froze. Startled to find the young heir standing there, he stammered. Young Lord Dale, this is merely... Dale's silence cut sharper than any blade. Petro, that was the man's name, tried to recover, laughing crudely. Ah, you're still young, my lord. Perhaps you've never known a woman. Shall I teach you? He pressed a knife against Eve's trembling neck. Ignoring the provocation, Dale said calmly, Eve, don't be afraid. You'll be safe soon. His gaze turned icy. In a world ruled by status, a low noble like Petro would never expect a duke's son to act against an imperial guest. Dale took advantage of that arrogance. A flicker of mana flared in his palm, then a burst of frost. Ice surged forward, striking Petro and sending him sprawling. Dale stepped closer, his tone sharp as winter steel. Kneel. What? Petro sputtered, furious and confused. I said kneel, Dale repeated, his eyes unyielding. Apologize to Miss Eve. She's a member of House Saxon's household, and you will treat her as such. Petro's outrage flared. How dare you? I represent His Majesty himself. To strike me over a lowly... Dale's voice cut through his protest like a blade. Tell me then, he asked coolly, does His Majesty the Emperor take pleasure in violating other men's servants? The corridor fell silent. Petro's face drained of color, and even the air seemed to freeze around Dale's quiet fury. At that very moment, Duke Alan Saxon, Marquis Eurus, and several guests entered the corridor, their footsteps echoing through the tense silence. Marquis Eurus surveyed the scene with a faint, amused smile. Now this is quite the intriguing sight, he remarked, his tone light but his eyes sharp. The Duke's gaze shifted to his son. Dale, he said evenly, what is the meaning of this uproar? Dale bowed slightly, his expression calm. Father, this man Petro attempted to violate one of House Saxon's maids. A murmur swept through the guests. One of the nobles from the imperial faction chuckled derisively. And for such a petty matter, young Lord Dale would dare treat Sir Petro with such disrespect? Seizing the moment, Petro fell to his knees and began to complain bitterly. My Lord Duke, your son has overstepped. He struck me without cause, behaving rashly before. Who allowed you to stand? Dale's voice sliced through the man's words like ice. The command was cold and absolute. Petro froze, trembling under the young lord's gaze. Dale turned to the assembly of nobles. The guests from the imperial capital, he said evenly, carry the honor of representing His Majesty the Emperor. Yet this man dared to sully that name by assaulting one of our household servants. His actions were not only shameful, but an insult to the Emperor himself. I could not permit such disgrace. A moment of stunned silence followed, then Marquis Eurus broke into laughter. Splendid, he said, his tone half amused, half impressed. Truly, young Lord Dale's tongue is as sharp as his father's sword. You are absolutely right. How dare a man representing His Majesty commit such filth? He smiled evilly as he declared to burn this insect. Petro's face went pale. Wait, Marquis, please. His plea ended in a scream as Eurus raised his hand, conjuring a blazing sphere of flame. The fire roared forward, engulfing Petro. His cries echoed through the hall until nothing but silence remained. He bowed slightly. The young lord's judgment was flawless. To protect his majesty's honor, filth like that must be erased without mercy. Still smiling faintly. Indeed, young Lord Dale, I see a brilliant future ahead of you. May your name resound across the empire. With that, the tension dispersed. The emperor's envoys withdrew, and calm slowly returned to the duke's castle. Days later, in the soft light of morning, Eve entered Dale's chamber to wake him. She hesitated at the door before speaking softly. "My lord, it's morning." Dale sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Thank you, Eve." He noticed the uncertainty in her voice. "Is something wrong?" Eve lowered her head, clutching the edge of her apron. "I just wanted to thank you for saving me that night. I'm proud to serve you, my lord." For a moment, Dale said nothing, watching the maid's trembling hands. He wondered why such simple gratitude carried so much hesitation. Even after all these years in this world, he still wasn't accustomed to being treated with reverence, but he knew he had to be. He smiled faintly. "You have nothing to thank me for, Eve. Just keep doing your duty. The name of House Saxon carries weight," he thought, "and as its heir, I'll use that weight to one day bring the empire to its knees." Later that day, Duke Alan Saxon summoned his son Dale to his study. The air was heavy with quiet authority as the Duke regarded him across the desk. With a calm but firm tone, he told Dale that while he had always believed him to be a child of extraordinary intellect, his recent behavior had been peculiar. He wanted to know why. Dale met his father's gaze, his expression unreadable, and asked an unexpected question: whether his father knew that, had the hero from another world not perished during his duel with the sword god, Lord Bardell, his next target would have been none other than the Duchy of Saxon itself. The Duke froze, startled by the boldness of the claim. "That's quite an accusation," he said slowly. "What makes you so certain?" Dale hesitated for a moment, weighing his words. "In truth," he thought, "I know this because in my past life I heard whispers of the Empire's schemes against House Saxon." But aloud, he changed his reasoning. He explained that the Empire had decided to eliminate the hero after realizing his immense strength had grown beyond their control, that their so-called champion had become a potential threat. Despite the hero's triumph over the Demon King, the Empire had never fully purged the corruption that lingered in the demon lands. Instead, they had issued an outrageous decree. The Saxon family was to reclaim and purify those cursed territories, transforming them into imperial holdings. The order drained House Saxon's wealth and manpower, even as the Empire mockingly rewarded them with titles over those desolate lands. Dale's voice grew colder as he continued. As long as the darkness persisted, Saxon's burden would never end. Worse, those in the Empire and across the continent derided them as the Clan of Darkness. And just as the Empire abandoned the hero it once praised, Dale said, so too will it cast aside House Saxon when the time comes. We are its next threat. The Duke's brow furrowed. "And how do you know the hero was abandoned rather than slain in battle?" Dale replied calmly. "It's only my inference. The official records claim the hero died gloriously against Lord Battle, but the pieces simply don't fit. Everything points to the Empire discarding him once his usefulness ended." Inside, Dale observed his father's expression, realizing he had struck a chord. Few alive knew that truth. He must be astonished that I pieced it together merely through research, Dale thought. He pressed on, his tone turning grave. "If my deductions are correct, father, then the Empire's justice is nothing more than tyranny, power cloaked in righteousness, stealing from the weak under the guise of order." For a long moment, Duke Alan Saxon was silent. Then, with quiet astonishment, he murmured, "You truly see farther than most adults. Tell me then, what path do you believe House Saxon should take?" Dale did not hesitate. House Saxon and the Empire cannot coexist. One day, we must destroy it. The Duke's eyes widened in disbelief. "Dale," he said sternly, "do you understand the weight of those words?" "I do," Dale replied evenly. "I'm not speaking of immediate rebellion. I'm speaking of 10 years from now." 10 years? The Duke echoed. Dale nodded. He laid out his reasoning with startling clarity. Across the continent, countless resistance groups still longed for independence. Noble houses, including their own, secretly feared the Empire's eventual betrayal. The economy was crumbling, banditry rising, and the scars of war remained unhealed despite the illusion of peace. "When the right moment comes," Dale said, "we must be ready. Until then, we build our strength quietly by supporting the resistance movements across the regions." He continued his detailed plan for hours, speaking with conviction as dusk painted the study in gold. When he finally finished, he looked at his father and asked, "What do you think?" The Duke leaned back and let out a deep, amused laugh. "You truly are extraordinary," he said proudly. "You see further than even I do. I am proud beyond measure to call you my son." Then, with newfound gravity, the Duke declared, "From this day forward I will no longer see you merely as my child or as the heir apparent. I will regard you as the future head of House Saxon. As one leader to another, I will listen to your counsel." Dale's chest tightened with emotion. Finally, the right to act with my own will. The Duke met his gaze and said, "Then tell me, as the future Lord of Saxon, what decision do you make here and now for our house?" Dale smiled faintly. "You promised to treat me as an equal, father. Based on that, I have one request. Permission to participate in the Tower Trial of Necropolis." The Duke's expression darkened with surprise. The Tower Trial, a perilous proving ground for mages, determined the ranking of those who challenged its arcane guardians. Victors could ascend to the status of Elder, and the one who conquered the summit would earn the title of Tower Master. "That place is deadly," the Duke warned. "Even accomplished magi have perished within. You haven't even reached the third circle yet. It's too soon." "I will reach the third circle soon," Dale replied without hesitation. The Duke shook his head. "Few achieve that before their 20s. Even for you, it's an immense challenge." But Dale's determination did not waver. "This isn't just for me, it's for you, for House Saxon. If I succeed, your position will strengthen across the Empire. The name of Saxon will earn respect, not pity." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then a faint smile curved the Duke's lips. "Very well," he said. "I will leave the decision to you." Dale's eyes lit with determination. "Thank you, father. I'll prove myself and House Saxon's strength to the world." A few days later, Duke Alan Saxon and his son Dale arrived in the infamous city of the dead, Necropolis. The enormous black gates creaked open, and the Duke, known across the continent as the Black Duke, was greeted with solemn reverence, those present bowing low in acknowledgement of his status. Dale, standing beside his father, stifled a yawn, murmuring to himself that he might have pushed himself too far this time. Around them, the murmurs began almost instantly, the news of Duke Saxon's arrival having already spread like wildfire, but all eyes were on the young lord beside him. "Is that him, the prodigy who reached the third circle before turning 11? One mage whispered. "He doesn't look like a genius, more like a tired brat." Another sneered. Someone laughed mockingly. "They say his swordsmanship rivals the Duke's knights. Ridiculous." Among the crowd stood Felix, the Academy's top graduate, who scoffed loudly. "Let's be honest, this trial belongs to me, not that spoiled noble," he declared, his voice brimming with arrogance. Ignoring the whispers, Dale followed his father to the foot of the Black Tower, where a graceful woman awaited them. She bowed deeply. "Welcome, Your Grace, Tower Master," she said, "and greetings to Lord Dale." The Duke smiled faintly. "It's been a while, Heiress." Lady Heiress, an elder of the tower and the Secretary General in charge of its operations, turned to Dale and knelt slightly. "It's an honor to serve you, my lord." Dale nodded politely. "Then I'll be in your care." She smiled. "Of course, please follow me." Heiress led them through the tower's cold corridors to a vast circular hall where 59 graduates from the Imperial Magic Academy were gathered, Dale's rivals in the tower trial. The air was thick with tension and ambition. Stepping onto a raised platform, Heiress introduced herself. "Welcome, participants. I am Heiress, Secretary General of the Black Magic Tower. You have all come here to take the first trial. Allow me to explain the rules." She gestured toward the pendants hanging around each contestant's neck. "These are your life point pendants. Each contains 1 life point and a protection spell. The test is a free-for-all battle. When a valid strike lands using the undead within the area, your opponent's pendant will shatter, and the shield will trigger, removing them from the trial. Each successful attack earns you 1 point. Collect 3 points, and you qualify for the next floor. The use of artifacts, however, will result in immediate disqualification." A murmur spread across the hall as mages began glancing nervously at one another. Dale observed quietly, thinking, so it's a simple filter to weed out the amateurs. But his presence did not go unnoticed. Whispers arose again, harsher this time. "That monster's really here? How does someone his age already reach the third circle?" Felix smirked. "Why don't we all deal with the so-called prodigy first?" A few hesitated. "But attacking the Duke's son? He's just another competitor once the test begins." Felix interrupted sharply. Dale overheard him and smiled faintly. Confident words. "Let's see if you can back them up." "Begin the trial," Heiress announced. In an instant, spells flared to life. The dead scattered across the arena began to twitch and rise, transforming into undead soldiers. Felix immediately directed his minion to attack Dale, who, curiously, still hadn't moved. The undead soldier swung its rusted blade down. only to have it blocked effortlessly by another corpse that Dale had raised moments earlier. Felix's eyes widened. Water magic? Before he could react, his soldier froze solid, the ice creeping across its body. Dual affinity? Someone gasped. He can use both water and dark magic? The frozen undead shattered into fragments. Dale's soldier advanced methodically, its movements precise and unnaturally fluid. Another contestant tried to intercept, but his undead's blade bounced harmlessly off an icy barrier coating Dale's creation. That attack won't work, Dale said coolly. I reinforced it with an ice shield. Cheating, Felix roared. You're breaking the rules. Only dark magic is allowed. Dale turned to Eris, his expression calm. Tell me, Lady Eris, does the rulebook state that undead must be enhanced with dark magic? The elder remained silent, watching him with unreadable eyes. Dale shrugged. Then I suppose I'm not breaking any rules. Felix clenched his fists, face red with fury. Everyone surround him. Dale smirked. So be it. As the horde of undead soldiers closed in, Dale didn't retreat. Instead, he rushed forward in one fluid motion, sidestepping a sword strike, snatching the weapon from his opponent, and striking the corpse with a black magic-empowered punch. The undead shattered instantly. He swung the stolen sword, slicing through another with ease, gasps echoing through the hall. His sword, it's too strong, one shouted. Eris watched carefully, murmuring, No, he's reforged the bones within the blade to increase its durability. Ingenious. Felix gritted his teeth. One by one, his undead fell. Then Dale leapt high into the air and brought his blade crashing down, cleaving Felix's final soldier in half. The top graduate froze, disbelief written across his face. A mage, fighting like a swordsman? Impossible. Dale approached him slowly, the arena silent but for the crackle of fading magic. Felix stumbled backward. But please wait, have mercy. Dale's expression was calm but merciless. Don't worry, you won't die, the pendant will protect you. His sword swung down, the pendant on Felix's chest shattered, and the protection spell whisked him out of the arena. Monster, Felix whispered as he vanished. Silence hung for a moment until Eris stood and raised her voice. The results are clear. Lord Dale Saxon is the sole survivor of the first trial, with 60 life points, the total of all competitors. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Dale looked around at the defeated mages and thought, This will be the first step of my ascent. Watch closely, this is where it begins. The scene shifted to the second floor of the tower trial, where the challenge required the defeat of the Guardian, a massive flesh golem. Dale reflected internally that typically, survivors from the first floor would band together to overcome this monstrous foe, but having eliminated them all earlier, he faced the trial entirely alone. Unlike the first floor, all types of magic were permitted here. Though artifacts were still banned, Dale considered this more than sufficient. He saw the trial as the perfect opportunity to establish his third circle and test the full extent of his abilities. The golem lunged at him, its massive fists swinging with crushing force, but Dale evaded effortlessly. Striking back, he wounded the creature's arm, eliciting a stunned reaction from the Guardian. A faint smile crossed his face as he began casting a new spell, Accelerated Decay. Eris, observing silently, noted that the magic Dale wielded was far from ordinary. The golem's flesh began to corrode and wither under the spell, and Eris wondered why Dale had chosen to corrode the creature rather than simply dismember it. Dale contemplated the strategy he had employed, thinking back to his past life. In that existence, biochemical warfare had been a critical tactic when confronting monsters alongside firearms. Wiping blood from his face, he mused whether observers like Eris realized that the horrors of biochemical tactics were now being manifested through black magic. By the end of the day, Dale had completed the second floor trial with unprecedented efficiency, setting a record by reaching the 10th floor. He was granted 4 days of rest before the 11th floor commenced. Meanwhile, the remaining 59 contestants were given a rare chance to retest, an attempt to recover from the devastation Dale had wrought on the first floor. That evening, Dale stood alone by a fountain, the quiet of the city washing over him. Teacher Sabia approached, offering congratulations on his outstanding performance. Dale thanked her, crediting much of his success to her teachings. Then, catching her off guard, he asked if she would like to go on a date, mentioning the festival being held in Necropolis. Sabia agreed, though she thought to herself that he was still too young to grasp the full meaning of romance. Dale, with a sly smile, thought, this must be what they mean by a dark heart. The festival was alive with music, fireworks, and laughter. Sabia, noting his composure, asked if he wasn't fatigued from the grueling trial. Not at all, Dale replied. I have a few days before the next challenge. Silence fell between them for a moment before Dale remarked that the moon looked beautiful tonight. She nodded in agreement. Dale reflected on how easy it was to be silent with Sabia, never feeling awkward, perhaps because she had always trusted him implicitly. He thought back to the past days, when he had achieved the third circle. At that moment, he had glimpsed what Sabia often described as the scenery of the mind. To surpass the second circle, he had pushed his mana beyond its normal limits, triggering mana overflow, and had found himself transported to a strange, empty realm, his mental world, the world of enlightenment. In that void, only Sabia's hand had reached out to him. Back at the festival, Dale looked at her and realized why he was drawn to the teacher who had illuminated his empty world. Without hesitation, he declared, I love you. Sabia froze, then asked him to repeat himself. Dale did, and she responded with a gentle smile, pulling him into an embrace. I understand, she said softly, and I feel the same way. Dale, thinking of the advantages of living a second life, smiled quietly to himself. A few days later, the 11th floor trial began. Dale noted that nothing had truly changed between him and Sabia since his confession. She probably considered it a childish crush from a 10-year-old. With that thought set aside, he focused entirely on the challenge ahead. Eris explained that this trial was a one-on-one magical duel, and the winner would ascend to the 12th floor. Dale faced his opponent, Albert Rosenheim, a third circle master who warned that he would show no mercy despite Dale's youth. Dale reflected that on this floor he could wield his full magical power, and with artifacts no longer restricted, the life point pendant could no longer guarantee safety. Albert prepared his assault, intending to demonstrate the gap between them. He unleashed a volley of dark arrows, each streaking toward Dale with lethal precision, mocking the boy's prior confidence. Dale, unfazed, dodged the attacks gracefully, noting to himself that Albert had begun his assault prematurely, yet no one intervened, curious to witness Dale's capabilities. This world rewards pure skill, he mused, silently cursing the arrogance of his opponent. Albert, frustrated, summoned a horde of bloodthirsty shadow spawn, demanding their eternal loyalty. Dale watched the spectacle with mild boredom, thinking the performance was over the top, but admitting Albert's skill surpassed the novices he had faced before. As the undead charged, Dale evaded them effortlessly, prompting Albert to roar in frustration. How long will you keep dodging? You cannot win by fleeing, he demanded, ordering one of his undead to self-destruct, declaring victory imminent. Suddenly, Dale vanished. Albert spun around, bewildered. Where? When did he? Dale reappeared behind him, smirking. Cheating against a child, isn't that a bit cowardly? He revealed his spectral form, a skill from the Cloak of Shadows, signaling that the fight had only just begun. Shadow creatures around him began to stir, growling in hunger, asking if they could devour Albert. Dale permitted them, cautioning them not to overindulge. The shadows descended, forcing Albert to scream in pain. As the dust settled, Dale called his shadows back, leaving Albert unconscious. Eris declared him the winner of the first round. When asked about the next opponent, the following contestant forfeited, preferring survival over combat. From that point forward, Dale advanced automatically by forfeit through most of the rounds, only engaging in one additional battle. Through these trials, he refined and mastered his 3 magic circles, systematically defeating each floor guardian as he ascended. By the time Dale reached the 20th floor, a worthy adversary finally emerged, the Headless Knight, a guardian personally forged by one of the Black Tower's elders. This creation was unlike any foe Dale had faced before, its presence exuding overwhelming power. Observers murmured among themselves, noting that even for the prodigious young lord, this trial might mark a true limit. Dale, however, smiled faintly, thinking it would be dull if everything progressed predictably. The battle commenced, and spectators watched in stunned silence. In a shocking turn, the Headless Knight fell to its knees before Dale. With a calm voice, Dale commanded, "End yourself." The knight immediately drove its weapon into its own chest, collapsing in destruction. Dale reflected on the unusual display of loyalty, impressed that a guardian would forsake its duty to obey him. Yet he realized he might have gone too far. To compel a creation to betray its master, a Black Tower elder, was a feat he hadn't intended to reveal. Satisfied he had proven his strength, Dale decided it was time to leave. As he moved toward the exit, observers asked why he departed before fully ascending. He considered the question carefully, understanding that even if he continued, there was a boundary he could not cross. To climb higher would mean transcending the realm of monsters entirely, entering a domain beyond comprehension. With that, Dale's trial concluded. The end of his trial signaled the conclusion of the Tower trials themselves. Upon their return, the Tower Master and his son were greeted with a full military salute. Every mage in the Black Tower, from noble families to the elders, bowed before Duke Alan Saxon and Dale. Dale's extraordinary accomplishments inspired a slow but steady unification of the northern region under House Saxon. Knights rallied in his name, fighting and cheering for the young lord and the Saxon banner. With the Tower trial behind him, Dale received orders from his father to lead a campaign against an orc horde. Despite the enormous responsibility for a 10-year-old, no one questioned his capability as a commander. As the legitimate heir to the Black Duke, Dale gradually consolidated the northern territories. Reporting back to his father, he proudly announced the defeat of 145 orcs. The Duke inquired about casualties during the night. Dale replied that 3 soldiers were likely injured and no others were lost. When asked if magic had been used to protect them, Dale shook his head, attributing their success solely to the skill of House Saxon's swords. The Duke smiled, impressed, and praised his son. Sir Helmet, observing the young lord's leadership, remarked that Dale had already grown accustomed to commanding a regiment-sized knight unit. Dale humbly credited Sir Helmet's guidance for his success, prompting praise from the seasoned warrior. Helmet noted that Dale had learned strategy, tactics, swordsmanship, and the art of war, predicting that it would not be long before he led his own domain in a territorial conflict. Dale's thoughts drifted to the idea of a domain war, welcoming any new stage of challenge with a smile. The scene shifted to Dale training with Charlotte. She lunged at him with a shout, exchanging rapid, precise blows. After their sparring session, Dale commented that her skill had improved slightly. Charlotte, annoyed, chided him for speaking, as if it didn't concern him. Dale asked if he had teased her too much. She reminded him that he had reached the 3rd circle and completed the 20th floor of the Tower trial, earning widespread acclaim, and questioned whether he wasn't growing weary of the praise. Dale reassured her, encouraging her that she would grow stronger. He acknowledged her talent, noting that, despite being only 10, Charlotte's abilities were remarkable. Charlotte snapped, insisting he stop treating her like a child. Dale smiled, teasing that she was still a child, to which she countered that he was a child too. Dale chuckled, claiming he was already an adult, guided by the consciousness of his past life. Later, Sir Helmet resumed lessons with Dale, introducing the hammer and anvil tactic. He explained that the maneuver relied on cavalry breaking the enemy's flank and encircling them, while infantry blocked counterattacks, the tactic named after the process of hammering metal on an anvil. Dale noted that the tactic's success depended entirely on the Black Cavalry, reflecting that the fundamental nature of war remained consistent across eras. Dale asked about Charlotte's progress. Helmet confirmed her training was commendable, though not yet at his level. Her swordsmanship fundamentals were forming, and she would soon begin mastering aura techniques and the Saxon family sword style. However, he mentioned a potential concern. Dale interrupted, guessing that the issue was whether Charlotte's style would integrate with the family's techniques. Narration explained that just as mages refined mana through their circles, knights could channel mana into aura, and as mages built towers, knights formed orders to preserve swordsmanship legacies. The Black Cavalry, part of the Knight Raven Order of House Saxon, relied on overwhelming force, whereas Charlotte's style emphasized speed and agility. While she could potentially reach the rank of the 7 swords, perhaps, but she'll never become the first sword, the pinnacle of the 7 swords, the position once held by her father. Helmet lamented that the Sword of Blossom style had vanished with the fall of the Night Kingdom, leaving Dale to wonder if the technique had truly disappeared. As Dale continued building his reputation through rigorous training and monster hunts, the time came to demonstrate his progress. The Duke received a messenger bearing alarming news. Baron Parker, a lower-ranking noble, claimed ownership of a copper mine under Saxon control and formally demanded a domain war. Dale recognized the recklessness of such a challenge. The messenger added that Archduke Brandenburg had pledged support for the Baron in exchange for a share of the mine and would dispatch the Knight Order of St. Magdalena Order to back him. Dale immediately deduced Brandenburg's motives, a calculated act of vengeance for past humiliation at the hands of Duke Alan Saxon. The stage for conflict was set, and Dale understood that this was both a test and a call to action. Meanwhile, Dale turned to his father, his expression unwavering as he boldly requested permission to march alongside the Knights of House Saxon. He declared his wish to personally lead their forces in the coming conflict, but the Duke's sharp, commanding tone silenced him at once. Without a moment's hesitation, Duke Alan refused, saying it was far too early for his son to shoulder such a burden. He warned Dale not to speak recklessly, reminding him that war between men was far different from hunting beasts. Those words struck deep. The light in Dale's eyes faded, his confidence crumbling into quiet dismay. Duke Alan then turned his attention to Baron Greenbelt, assuring him that his mines would be protected. The Baron bowed repeatedly, gratitude trembling in his voice. Dale, watching from the side, felt the sting of rejection tighten in his chest. Later that evening, he met with his uncle Helmut and recounted everything. Frustration colored his tone as he confessed his feelings. He was certain he could outdo any commander, yet his father refused to trust him. Helmut listened patiently, then advised him not to dwell on anger. He reasoned that Duke Alan surely had his own motives, even if they seemed harsh. Then, with a quiet smile, Helmut presented Dale with something curious. It was a board game, one that mirrored the complexities of war. Intrigued, Dale leaned closer, instantly recognizing the symbolism. It wasn't just a pastime, it was a battlefield of intellect. Helmut chuckled, impressed by his quick understanding, and explained that mastering the game could sharpen his strategic mind more than any lesson in swordsmanship. But before he could finish, Dale snatched the board from his hands, eyes gleaming with sudden determination. "This is exactly what I need," he said, already walking away. Helmut called after him, bewildered, but Dale didn't look back. Moments later, he stood before Duke Alan once again, clutching the game. He challenged his father to judge him not with words but through strategy, to let him earn his place through this very match. If he won, he asked to be granted command in the upcoming war. Duke Alan stared at him in disbelief, astonished by his persistence. But Dale stood firm, conviction blazing in his eyes. He spoke of what he had learned, that true war was not mere might, but a contest of intellect and planning. Helmut awkwardly tried to defuse the situation, apologizing for the young lord's enthusiasm, but Duke Alan raised a hand to silence him. His gaze sharpened with intrigue. He agreed on one condition. If Dale lost, he would abandon the idea of joining the battle entirely. The game began. A hush settled over the room as father and son faced each other across the board. Each move echoed with tension. Dale's mind worked like a blade, swift, precise, deliberate. He counted every attack, anticipated every trap. Before long, the impossible happened. He won 2 out of 3 rounds. Helmut could barely believe it. Even though Duke Alan had given himself every advantage, more pieces, better positioning, Dale still triumphed. When the final piece fell, Dale lifted his gaze toward his father, his voice calm but resolute, asking if the Duke would honor his promise. Duke Alan exhaled, a faint smile curling on his lips. He asked when Dale had learned the game. Dale lied lightly, claiming he had studied the rules from an old book in the library years ago. The Duke simply nodded, saying nothing more. A promise was a promise. He declared that Dale would lead the knights in the coming campaign. For a moment, Dale couldn't breathe. Joy and pride surged through him. Helmut stood frozen in disbelief. But Duke Alan's tone soon turned grave. He reminded Dale that the honor of House Saxon would rest entirely on his shoulders. Failure was not an option. Then, in a rare moment of warmth, he asked his son if he truly understood the weight of what he was accepting. Dale met his father's gaze with unshakable resolve, assuring him that he would not disappoint. The Duke's stern features softened. "Then go," he said quietly. "Show me the result of your training." Sometime later in Macburg, the grand and imposing castle of Count Brandenburg stood tall beneath a gray, heavy sky. Inside its vast stone halls, fury echoed. Count Brandenburg's voice roared across the chamber as he shouted at his son, Philip, veins bulging on his forehead. He demanded to know if Philip had been drinking and idling in the slums again, his anger growing fiercer with every word. Rumors had already begun to spread that the young heir of House Saxon would soon lead knights into battle, while his own son wasted away in disgrace. Demanding to know what his son was doing while his rival prepared for war, Philip, completely unmoved by his father's wrath, gave a lazy grin and said there was no need to worry, dismissing his opponent arrogantly as a mere child, nothing more than a whelp of 10 at best. With a smug tone, he promised to crush that brat from House Saxon, boasting that he and his father's knights could easily handle him. Count Brandenburg's patience shattered. He struck the table again, harder this time, the impact rattling the goblets and making Philip flinch. His voice thundered with venom as he repeated Philip's words in disbelief. A whelp of 10 at best, an arrogant brat from House Saxon. His eyes blazed as he declared that the boy his son mocked was a monster far beyond his comprehension, someone whose coattails Philip couldn't even touch in 100 years. He called his son a worthless insect, inferior even to that 10-year-old whelp. Philip froze, his false confidence melting away as the insult hit him like a blade. The Count's fury simmered into cold bitterness as he thought silently to himself that he should have taken hold of Charlotte much sooner. After a long pause, he turned to his son with authority and declared that in the coming battle, he would entrust the command of their knights to him. Philip's face brightened instantly, excitement flooding his features as he eagerly accepted. But the Count's expression turned cold once more. He barked sharply, asking what his son was so pleased about, then mocked him cruelly, saying his role would be purely ceremonial, while true command would belong to Adjutant Lord Milvus. Philip's face twisted in confusion and disbelief as he asked what his father meant, but the Count ignored him and ordered Milvus to remove Philip immediately. Milvus bowed slightly. Count Brandenburg let out a long, furious sigh, his thoughts burning with frustration. If it were up to him, he would have gone to battle himself, but he couldn't go all out against a child, as it would stain his reputation. His hands clenched tightly as a far more troubling thought struck him. Perhaps this was Duke Saxon's plan all along. Days later, the scene shifted to Castle Greenbelt, where anticipation filled the air. Soldiers and nobles alike waited for the arrival of their new commander, the young heir of House Saxon. Baron Greenbelt stood nervously by the gates, straightening his coat again and again as Dale approached. The Baron greeted him with a polite, trembling smile, his voice betraying his nerves. Behind him, whispers rippled through the crowd. Some murmured in disbelief that the commander was just a boy. One scoffed quietly, wondering if he even knew how to wield a sword. Another said people called him a prodigy, and perhaps it was best not to underestimate him. Their soft laughter and uncertain tones filled the air. Trying to maintain composure, Baron Greenbelt smiled and told Dale that his presence alone gave everyone reassurance, that seeing him there inspired confidence and hope for victory. Dale thanked him sincerely, his calm composure unshaken. But deep down, the Baron's doubts lingered. Could someone so young truly lead soldiers in battle? Even with the Black Cavalry supporting him, Dale was only 10, far too young for such a burden. Gathering his courage, the Baron offered to escort Dale to a banquet prepared in his honor, explaining that the cooks had spent hours preparing it. But Dale shook his head immediately, his voice steady and firm, saying there was no time to waste. The Baron blinked, startled, unsure what the young lord meant. Then, without warning, Dale drew his sword, pointing it toward Baron Greenbelt. Though his smile was bright, his tone was sharp as steel. He declared that before anything else, he intended to inspect the condition of the troops. His gaze swept over the assembled soldiers, and in a clear, unwavering voice he asked who among them was the strongest.
Baron was trembling, completely confused and unsure what to do. Dale asked him again, calmly but firmly, who was the strongest under his command. Baron, terrified, couldn't answer. At that moment, a red-haired soldier stepped forward. According to him, there was no one here who could defeat him, but inwardly, he was thinking something completely different. This brat? Just because his noble family gave him a position, he's walking around swinging a sword like he owns the place. I'll teach him a lesson myself. He pointed his thumb toward himself and boldly declared that he was the strongest. Dale instantly understood what the man was thinking. Baron, however, felt his soul leave his body. His own knight was speaking so rudely to a child from a highly noble family who had been placed in command. Dale slowly pulled back his sword and, with a light laugh, said clearly, "Everyone here is doubting my ability. All of you think I'm just a 10-year-old kid who is suddenly put in charge of an important battle without any discussion." Then, Dale stabbed his sword into the ground and spread his arms toward Baron. He reminded him, doubt is mutual, because he also don't believe his knights have any competence. And there's only one way to clear doubt, with the sword. With a sinister smile, Dale added, "That strongest knight your knight's so proud of, he's practically drunk out of his mind. At this point, he doesn't even need to question him. He's proving his doubts all by himself." Hearing these harsh words, the red-haired man's fury exploded. He drew his sword and pointed it straight at Dale. With anger twisting his voice, he shouted, "I, Harbuck, will prove the steel of Baron's sword with my honor as a knight." Dale was clearly amused. He knew now that the fight was going to be interesting. And then Dale and Harbuck stood face to face, fully fully prepared for battle. All the knights had already surrounded them, forming a tight circle. Dale looked at Harbuck and asked calmly, "You must have heard about my sword." Harbuck let out a short laugh and replied, "Yes, I've heard about your peculiar blade." Dale frowned slightly. "Where does all this confidence come from? Do your arms really hold that much strength?" Without answering, Harbuck drew his sword and launched the first strike. Dale blocked it instantly with his shadow magic. Harbuck continued attacking relentlessly, swinging his blade again and again, but Dale matched him each time, blocking every strike with precision. Dale observed him carefully. His sword isn't infused with aura. Strange. Only high-ranking knights can use aura blades, but still, he's doing his best. I respect that. With that thought, Dale counterattacked using his shadow tacticals. Harbuck failed to understand what was happening. Those attacks were too strange, but even then he tried cutting through the shadows with his sword. Harbuck frowned. Why aren't Dale's attacks stopping? And why isn't my artificial aura responding? Dale, meanwhile, kept pressing forward. His skills aren't impressive at all. But before he could finish that thought, something unexpected happened. Harbuck suddenly collapsed to the ground. Baron Greenbelt's eyes widened in shock. He rushed forward, shouting Harbuck's name, and knelt beside him. "What happened? What did you do to him?" he demanded, panic rising in his voice. Even Dale looked startled. How did he lose so easily?" Baron Greenbelt, still shocked, said, "Young master, what have you done? Before such an important battle, you've injured one of their key knights." Dale spoke politely, addressing the Baron by name. "Before accusing me, understand the situation. If this is the level of his skill, then he would only drag us down in the upcoming battle. Or is your goal simply to stand behind and watch the Saxon house do all the work?" The Baron stiffened, clearly troubled. Dale stepped closer, his sword pointed forward. "Is this man truly one of your key knights? Someone who is supposed to strengthen your forces?" He raised his blade slightly and continued, "The Saxon house will never hesitate to protect your house, but we will not allow you to neglect your duty either. Until the battle ends, our duchy's knights will serve you like a sword." Then, Dale spoke firmly, his voice echoing through the camp. "Now choose. Will you stand me, or will you lose because of your own weakness?" At his words, every soldier present dropped to one knee before Dale, placing their loyalty at his feet. The scene then shifted away where Duchess Elena was crying, devastated that her son had gone there all alone. Duke Alan, Saxon, comforted her gently. "There is no need to be worried," he assured her. "Your son possesses far more potential than you imagine. As long as Dale continues to grow, he will outshine anything you fear. One day, our son will rule this world." The scene then shifts to Dale himself. He stood quietly, lost in thought. There is no hope for someone who knows nothing. I'm nothing more than a frog in a well. I've barely begun to understand how strange this world truly is. He thought of the Holy Awards man. He must have attacked after learning about the state of this land. If that's the case, then I need to create a plan of my own. Next day, the morning began outside the castle, where Dale was overseeing training for all the soldiers. Harbuck, still recovering, tried dragging a massive stone, but soon collapsed. Exhausted, another knight encouraged him to keep going, but Harbuck was already past his limit. Dale sat on a raised throne-like platform to the side. Sir Bale stood respectfully at his right, while on the other side, the knight was scolding Harbuck harshly for failing such basic training. Harbuck tried to explain himself, but the man wasn't willing to listen. Dale looked at Sir Bale and said calmly, "You're not doing anything about them." Sir Bale bowed slightly. "You need to inform Baron Greenbelt's knight," Dale continued, "that everything, starting with stamina training, they are all completely unqualified." Sir Bale agreed instantly. Dale then instructed, "Send someone to Baron Parker's territory and tell them we wish to propose negotiations." Sir Bale blinked in surprise. "Negotiations? My lord?" Dale chuckled. "Yes, I don't intend to accept a humiliating peace terms. There's just someone I'd like to see before the battle begins." A few days later, a negotiation camp was established on the tense border between the two baronies. Inside one of the main tents, Dale sat calmly on a chair, while his knight stood silently beside him. With his fingers interlocked beneath his chin, Dale analyzed the situation with deep interest. He believed that if events continued in the same direction, the Knights of St. Magdalena, currently on a long-distance expedition with extremely limited supplies, would soon be forced into a desperate permanent strike. At the same time, he knew that Baron Parker's knight force could not be underestimated either. While Dale was lost in thought, his knight informed him that Lord Philip had entered the tent. As soon as Dale saw the group, he understood the true structure of their hierarchy. Philip, the eldest son of Count Brandenburg, was clearly present only for show, while the real authority rested with the seasoned commander standing behind him, Sir Milvas. Philip took his seat, and Dale greeted him politely. Philip responded with a mocking smirk, implying that the situation had grown too large, and that Dale's attempt at negotiation meant he was frightened. Dale recognized the provocation, and calmly suggested that perhaps this was the same reason Philip had agreed to the negotiation. Philip immediately denied that he had come because of fear, But before he could finish, Dale interrupted and clarified that he had not been addressing Philip at all. He stated that he had been directing his words toward the actual commander, Sir Milvas, because Philip was merely a figurehead placed in the battlefield without any real authority. Sir Milvas was momentarily shocked. Very few people, even within their own faction, knew that Count Brandenburg considered Philip a disgrace lacking talent. Yet Dale had spoken as if he knew this hidden truth perfectly. Dale continued by remarking that Philip should understand the feeling of not being trusted even by one's own father. Sir Milvas immediately grasped Dale's intention and declared that the negotiation should end at once. He advised Philip that there was no further need to remain in the tent. However, Philip was already overwhelmed with anger. Dale's words had struck deep. Dale further added that Philip behaved as if he required permission even to speak, and the way he obeyed a subordinate made him resemble a servant rather than the heir of a noble family. This insult enraged Philip even more. Dale, still composed, remarked that Philip hardly looked like the eldest son of a count's household, and instead resembled a master being dragged around by his own servant. Sir Milvas attempted to caution Philip to maintain composure, realizing fully that Dale's intention was to disrupt their command system and destabilize their unity from the very start. Yet Philip dismissed Milvas's warning, shouting at him in anger. Dale leaned back comfortably, observing their internal conflict with amusement. He internally compared Philip to a puppet, and wondered whether Philip belonged to the Holy Swordsman or to Sir Milvas, since his actions were dictated entirely by others. Dale recognized that his plan had succeeded. He had never intended to negotiate. He had come solely to disrupt their chain of command. Finally, Dale instructed the knight beside him to leave the tent. The knight obeyed silently, stepping outside. After Dale's knight stepped outside the tent, leaving only Dale and Philip in the dimly lit space, Dale slowly spread both hands forward on the table, the gesture deliberate and steady, signaling that the true discussion was now beginning. In a calm and authoritative manner, he stated that since no one else was present, it was time for them to speak as the highest commanders, those who held full responsibility for the fate of the battlefield. Philip, still trembling with anger, struggled to control his expression. His jaw was clenched, his breathing uneven, yet he forced himself to give a stiff nod. Before he could compose himself further, Sir Milvas made one last attempt to warn him. Milvas reminded Philip of Dale's intentions, urging him to remain cautious and not be swayed by provocation. But Philip turned toward him with a burning glare, one filled with both arrogance and wounded pride. He coldly reminded Sir Milvas who the Supreme Commander truly was. The words struck Milvas harder than the look, and for a moment the seasoned commander felt a chill. Despite Philip's incompetence, he was still the son of Count Brandenburg. Moreover, the responsibility of dealing with the eldest son of House Saxon had fallen entirely on Milvas. Now, however, with every second that passed, it became clearer that Dale had played them from the very beginning. Understanding that the situation had reached a point beyond recovery, Sir Milvas bowed his head slightly and obeyed Philip's order without protest. He left the tent in silence, the flap closing behind him and leaving Philip completely exposed before Dale. Once alone, Dale politely thanked Lord Philip for allowing the private conversation, though there was a subtle weight in his voice that hinted at control rather than gratitude. He calmly reminded Philip of the true purpose of the negotiation, why such a meeting had been strictly insisted upon in the first place. Philip, caught between anger and confusion, managed to ask whether Dale had any specific terms regarding continued pursuit or the possibility of withdrawal. Dale leaned forward, placing both hands firmly on the table. His voice remained steady and his expression showed absolute confidence. He stated his condition clearly. If the Knights of St. Magdalena withdrew from the battlefield immediately, House Saxon would ensure that they received all necessary supplies for their safe return. Philip's temper exploded almost instantly. He slammed both hands on the table so hard that the wooden surface rattled. He insisted that such terms held no real value, and that Dale was treating a serious negotiation as if it were a child's game. But Dale remained calm, almost unaffected by the outburst. He offered an apology for his earlier mockery, acknowledging that he had indeed provoked Philip. He then explained with chilling clarity what would happen if Philip refused to withdraw. Once the battle began, thousands of Philip's knights would be slaughtered. Those who survived would be taken prisoner, and when the news spread, all the shame, failure, and humiliation would fall directly upon Philip, not Sir Milvas. Not any subordinate, but Philip alone. Dale's expression shifted then, becoming cold and sharp. He stated plainly that if such devastation occurred, even Philip's father's reputation would crumble and the honor of their noble house would be dragged straight through the dirt. Hearing this, Philip felt a heavy pressure settle on him, a weight that tightened around his chest. For the first time since entering the tent, he truly understood how deep the consequences could be. Dale continued relentlessly, reminding him that this was his final chance to protect not only his reputation, but also the legacy of his family. Philip forced a painful, strained smile in response. He admitted that Sir Milvas had been correct all along. Dale's true aim was to humiliate him and shake his confidence. But Dale, resting his chin on his interlocked fingers, replied with quiet composure that he was only stating the truth. He added that this was Philip's last chance, and that Philip was not acting nearly as confident as he tried to appear. Dale then reminded him of one final harsh reality. If defeat befell their army, responsibility would not fall on Sir Milvas, but entirely on Philip as the officially appointed Supreme Commander. Every accusation, every failure, every stain on their reputation would land directly on the head of Count Brandenburg's eldest son. Philip, still forcing a stiff artificial smile, attempted to recover some dignity. He claimed that Dale would not be able to remain so relaxed for long, and that he would soon prove in front of everyone who the true commander on the battlefield was. But Dale remained perfectly composed, telling Philip that maintaining confidence was good, as long as he could hold on to it for what was coming next. After the tense negotiation concluded, the scene shifted to Baron Greenbelt's castle. A short time had passed since the meeting. On the other side, at the rooftop of the enemy castle, Sir Milvas stood tall, overlooking the surrounding lands with several of his knights. One of the knights was observing the Greenbelt estate through a spyglass, keeping a close watch on enemy movement. Sir Milvas asked for a report, and the knight informed him that the main force of House Saxon had begun moving and seemed fully prepared for battle. Hearing this, Milvas recalled Dale's composed expression during the negotiation, an expression he could not forget. Despite being young, Dale had shown no signs of nervousness or hesitation. His calm behavior made it clear that he was no beginner. His experience and maturity had been evident in every word and movement. Sir Milvas hinted that Dale, being only 10 years old, might still work to their advantage. He then drew his sword sharply. His expression darkened as he declared to his troops that they would be the ones to teach that child a hard lesson. His knights raised their voices together in fierce agreement, shouting that they would indeed teach the boy. Meanwhile, back at the barren outskirts of Greenbelt's castle, one of Dale's knights rushed toward him with an exhausted expression. He informed Dale that Sir Milvas's main force had started advancing in their direction. Dale simply nodded, maintaining complete calm as if the news carried no weight at all. He then raised his sword toward his own knights and declared that it was time for House Saxon to prove its name. He stated that today, they would show blood worthy of their lineage. His knights roared in response, repeating their young commander's words with unwavering determination. The battle began the moment a soldier on the field raised the war horn. Its echo swept across the plains, and within seconds the armies of both sides clashed violently. The battleground erupted with the thunder of spears striking shields and swords cutting through armor. Dust rose like smoke as the two factions collided with full force. From behind the front line, Sir Milvas advanced through the formation, his soldiers fighting relentlessly around him. With fury burning in his eyes, he ordered the first cavalry to charge forward. The troops moved with practiced discipline, splitting into 3 formations just as he had planned. For Sir Milvas, the heart of this battle depended on one crucial objective. They had to block House Saxon's Nightcrow Knights. But accurately judging the true power of the Nightcrow Knights was still impossible. Their strength had never been properly measured. Because of this uncertainty, Sir Milvas made a strategic choice. Young Lord Philip was stationed at the center, rather than the vanguard, sheltered from unexpected variables. Meanwhile, Baron Parker's forces were assigned to the left wing to suppress Baron Greenbelt's knights. According to Sir Milvas's simulated war analyses, the combined Brandenburg forces acting under his command would eventually strike the flank of House Saxon's Nightground Knights, while his central force held the line against their primary offensive. With all these predictions in mind, they proceeded with standard, disciplined frontal tactics. Raising his heaven-horned sword, Sir Milvas declared to his troops that they must not waste this perfect opportunity. His soldiers shouted in response, charging with renewed resolve. On the other side, Dale's soldiers braced themselves as Brandenburg knights surged toward them, heaven-horned steel gleaming. One of the Brandenburg elites prepared to deliver a fatal blow, but before his strike could land, a black cavalry knight suddenly swept in, intercepting the attack mid-swing. Immediately after, Dale stepped out from behind the knight, his appearance stirring excitement among Baron Greenbelt's troops. To them, the arrival of young Lord Dale meant the true beginning of the battle. Their commander had personally taken the field. With fierce determination burning in his eyes, Dale ordered his soldiers to hold the line and fight to their final breath. Then he turned to his seasoned black cavalry and commanded them to charge forward in the name of House Saxon. The black cavalry thundered into combat, clashing violently with Sir Milvas's troops. Amid the chaos, Milvas kept observing Dale carefully. He realized that Dale had initiated a bold strategy. He sought to decide the war in a single decisive clash of main forces, even using himself as bait to provoke the enemy's full commitment. For someone so young to plan with such calculated daring was extraordinary. Quietly, he praised Dale's ability. Sir Milvas allowed a faint smile to form as he observed the battlefield. This was exactly the situation he had hoped for. Without hesitation, he charged forward, shouting to his soldiers to advance in the name of St. Magdalena. The troops of House Brandenburg roared in response and surged ahead, crashing into the Black Cavalry's formation. Among the Black Cavalry, One knight urgently warned his comrades not to allow the enemy anywhere near young Lord Dale. Another knight shouted to the rest of their unit to push forward and protect their young commander at all costs. Both sides collided violently. The Black Cavalry and Sir Milvas's forces slammed into each other with explosive force. Yet despite the Black Cavalry's reputation, it was Sir Milvas's formation that broke through first, cutting deep into the enemy line with blazing momentum. Sir Milvas urged his men onward, declaring that speed was the key to victory. He pointed toward the center of the battlefield and ordered them to cut down the young Lord Dale's head and end the battle swiftly. He reminded them that they were the elite of Brandenburg, and that today they would prove why that title belonged to them. With a flash of his heaven-horn sword, Sir Milvas pierced through a Black Cavalry knight, cutting him down with precision. Another knight sprang up behind him, his blade already a hair's breadth from Milvas's neck. But Milvas turned with terrifying speed. His sword thrust deep into the knight's chest, and with a swift pulling motion, he cut him down. A third Black Cavalry soldier charged toward him. Without slowing, Milvas severed his head in a single fluid strike. He stepped forward again, leaving a trail of fallen enemies behind him. However, even in the midst of this brutal advance, something felt wrong to him. His instincts screamed that the situation did not make sense. The Black Cavalry, known across the battlefield as unstoppable destroyers, were collapsing far too easily. They were crumbling without offering real resistance. A knight within the Black Cavalry suddenly shouted for his comrades to retreat. Sir Milvas narrowed his eyes. These men did not fight like the true Nightcrow Knights. He realized that the formation, the resistance, the pressure, none of it matched the legendary force he had expected. An ominous feeling crept into his chest, telling him that something vital had been overlooked. Just then, one of his own horsemen galloped toward him at full speed. The soldier snapped to a stop and urgently relayed a message from Baron Parker. He reported that Baron Parker's left wing was being completely decimated. The news struck Sir Milvas like a lightning bolt. His expression hardened instantly. The left wing, supposedly stable under Baron Parker, was on the verge of total collapse. Something was terribly, disastrously wrong with the battlefield. On Baron Parker's side, the situation had already reached its breaking point. His last remaining soldier fell as a sword pierced through his chest, collapsing lifelessly onto the ground. Baron Parker stared in disbelief. He could not understand how the Knights of Baron Greenbelt, whom he considered fools, were suddenly wielding such overwhelming black aura. His entire knight unit had been crushed with impossible strength, and nothing about it made sense. Meanwhile, on the side of Count Brandenburg's eldest son, Philip, panic erupted. One of his soldiers ran toward him with pale, frightened eyes, reporting the disastrous message received from Baron Parker's unit. Another soldier confirmed that the attackers flooding Parker's left wing were knights wielding aura, and they had successfully breached the flank. A nearby knight shouted in denial, insisting that it was impossible. Aura knights were supposed to be with Dale, and Dale himself was currently engaged with Sir Milvas, positioned far from Parker's left wing. The situation defied all logic. Young Philip gritted his teeth, trembling at the memory of Dale's cold warning that if defeat came, all responsibility would fall squarely on Philip's head. The weight of those words pressed on him like a death sentence. For a moment, he felt as if death itself was breathing at the back of his neck. He refused to let the situation end in ruin, not with all the blame waiting for him. Just then, another messenger soldier arrived from behind, carrying an urgent dispatch from Sir Milvas. The messenger reported that Sir Milvas had ordered the center troops and rear cavalry to immediately merge with Baron Parker's forces in order to reinforce the collapsing defense on the left wing. But before the soldier could finish delivering the full message, Philip shouted fiercely for silence and ordered his men to gather around him instead. In a frantic voice, Philip commanded every available unit from the rear cavalry to regroup at his position immediately. He announced that the enemy was breaking through the right wing, and with burning desperation in his eyes, he declared that he would personally eliminate the wretched Dale before their collapsing flank doomed them. A soldier, shocked by Philip's reckless announcement, rushed to relay the message to Sir Milvas. Upon hearing it, Sir Milvas pressed a hand over his face in frustration. This was the exact opposite of what he had instructed Philip to do. He had ordered the young lord to reinforce the left wing, but Philip was now redirecting forces elsewhere. Milvas saw the disaster clearly. His right wing was already dominating the enemy's inferior left. Sending more troops there would only cause congestion, restricting movement and ruining their advantage. The left wing, however, was collapsing rapidly and needed urgent reinforcement. Yet, the fool, Philip, blinded by the glory of striking the supposed enemy commander, had completely misjudged the battlefield. His obsession with killing Dale had overridden all strategic sense. For Milvas, the picture was now painfully clear. The left wing would undoubtedly fall, and once it did, their entire army would face an inevitable encirclement, trapping them on all sides. Amid the growing chaos, one of Sir Milvas's soldiers hurried to his side and cautiously suggested that they should consider withdrawing before the defeat became irreversible. The words hung heavily in the air. But before Sir Milvas could respond, a calm yet firm voice echoed from behind them. Not just yet. Startled, Sir Milvas turned his head sharply, and there stood young Lord Dale, having arrived on the battlefield once more. Dale's expression was unreadable, but his presence alone carried a quiet authority. He stated that the battle was far from over, implying that a decisive moment was still within reach. Sir Milvas's eyes hardened with determination. He declared that they would destroy the enemy's premature sense of victory. Lifting his sword toward the sky, he called out to the 1st Cavalry Battalion. Every soldier turned toward him, listening intently. Sir Milvas raised his sword to his forehead, closed his eyes, and stated solemnly that only one path remained. The soldiers mirrored his gesture, lifting their blades to their heads in a ceremonial stance. Together, they recited a sacred invocation. In the name of Saint Magdalena, may this pure, white blade receive blessing. Grant us the protection of Goddess Sistina. May her benevolence and mercy guide us. A hushed reverence settled among them, until Sir Milvas's eyes snapped open, now glowing faintly with a red aura. His expression shifted into one of fierce resolve. With a roar, he commanded his soldiers to pierce through the enemy lines and take the enemy commander's head. His voice shook the air like thunder. He urged his troops to follow him, and the soldiers surged forward with renewed ferocity. The cavalry's horses burst into motion, kicking up blasts of wind as they charged, the air around them trembling with the force of their advance.